Um, so I have a section of things I need to read before we call the meeting to order. So I think that'll give anyone else who wishes to join some time. It is quite a bit of script, so I think I'll just get started with that.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to read some information here about how to join and get involved in this meeting. So bear with me while I go through all of this. It's required.
Did you guys take roll already?
We'll do the roll after I read this.
Got it. Thanks.
Sure. All right. Oh, Commissioner Suma, you can't. Are you able to hear? All right. Well, while you work out that technical issue, I'll go ahead and read through. So, pursuant to the provisions of California Governor's Executive Order N29-20, issued on March 17th, 2020, to prevent the spread of COVID-19, this meeting will be held by virtual teleconference only with no physical location. The meeting will be broadcast live on cable TV channel 26 and on the Mid-Penn Media Center at midpennmedia.org. Members of the public who wish to participate can do so by email, phone, or computer. To ensure participation in a particular item, we suggest calling in or connecting 15 minutes prior to the item you wish to speak on. For written communications, please send an email to planning.commission@cityofpaloalto.org. Spoken comments via a computer will be accepted through the Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the commission, go through zoom.us/join. The meeting ID is 463-430-942. You will be asked to enter an email address and a name. We request that you identify yourself by name, as this will be visible online and will be used to notify you that it's your turn to speak. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, click on Raise Hand. The moderator will activate and unmute speakers in turn. When called, please limit your remarks to the time allotted. A timer will be shown on the computer to help keep track of your time. Spoken public comments using a smartphone will be accepted through the Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the commission, download the Zoom application to your phone from the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and enter the meeting ID 463-430-942. Please follow the previous steps A through D. Spoken public comments using a phone call, call the number 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 463-430-942. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit *9 on your phone so we know you wish to speak. You'll be asked to provide your first and last name before addressing the commission. You'll be advised how long you have to speak, and when called, please limit your remarks to the agenda item and time limit allotted. You can find this information on the last page of the agenda. To better facilitate public comments, our meeting host, Ven Nguyen, will identify each person with a raised hand by name or the last 4 digits of your phone number and request that you state your name and the agenda item you wish to speak on. If you wish to speak under any item not on the agenda, please state your intent to speak under oral communications. When it's your time to speak during public comment, you will be identified and provided 3 minutes to speak. Any callers with blocked numbers will wait until the end of the speaker's portion. The host will unmute them one at a time and all will be asked to speak. So then I think here it says I should ask you about public comments. Do we want to call roll first or do the public comments first?
Well, first let's identify the public speakers so that
Okay.
we know how many public speakers we have and for which item. So first I'm gonna go down my list and read all the public speakers I have on my list. And if there's anyone else who's attending the meeting who wants to speak that was not on my list yet, please raise your hand now. So for agenda item number 2 and VCAP, we have Rebecca Sanders and Can Joy. For agenda item number 3, 3000 Alexis, we have Jeff Froke. And are there anyone else who wants to speak? I see there are a couple hands raised, so I will go through each person. A. Della Porta, can you please state your name for the record and also identify which agenda item you want to speak on?
Hi, my name is Angela Della Porta. I'm a member of the working group and I'd like to speak on, I don't know which number it is, but it's the NVCAP agenda item.
Sure, that's going to be item number 2. And I'm sorry, did you say your first name was Ann?
Angela.
Angela, okay. Okay, thank you, Angela. Once we get to the item, we will call on you to speak. Okay, the public with the user first name Winter, can you please state your name for the record and then also identify which agenda item you want to speak on? Hi, Winter, are you there?
Yes, I just unmuted. Winter Dellenbach, I want to speak on the NV cap.
Sure. Thank you, Winter. Once we get to that item, we will call on you. All right, last person with the hand raise. Actually, there's two more people with the hand raise. We have Kelsey Baines. Kelsey, can you please state your name for the record and also identify which item you want to speak on?
You just come fix it. I don't care if someone sees it. There we go. Okay, so where's my thing?
Kelsey, we can hear you.
Jesus Christ.
I just I think are talking over me.
Hello, Kelsey, are you there?
Vin, I think her internet connection was breaking up a little bit. I saw her go off mute. Kelsey, wanted to unmute one more time and try to speak and see if we can understand you.
Sure. Switching. So maybe that will help.
Yeah. Kelsey, I'm really sorry. There seems to be something wrong with your microphone. We can hear voice, we can hear sound coming out, but it's really jumbled and garbled. Let's give that one more try. Let me disable you and then re-enable you to see if that helps. Okay, Kelsey, go ahead and give it one more try.
Okay, I'm trying again. I switched rooms. I would like to speak to
Perfect.
the cap item.
Okay, you said NV cap, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Kelsey. All right. So we have no more raised hands. Let's give everyone another opportunity. If anyone else who wants to speak, who I did not call upon yet, please raise your hand now. Okay, seeing as how there are no more raised hands, we have one more raised hand that just raised their hand. Let's see here. The user with the name Citizen, can you please state your name for the record and then also identify which agenda item you want to speak on?
My name is Cody, and I would like to speak on oral communications.
Okay, thank you, Cody. Okay, we have no more raised hands, so Carrie, we can move on with the agenda.
Great, thank you. So we'll call the meeting to order. Would you like to do roll call, Vin?
Yes, all right. Chair Templeton,
Present.
Vice Chair Rupavar,
Present.
Commissioner Ochek,
Present.
Commissioner Heckman,
Present.
Commissioner Lowing, Commissioner Lowing,
Yes, present.
Commissioner Riggs.
He notified us he would be absent today.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have a quorum, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, we have also Commissioner Suma.
Present.
Thank you, we have a quorum.
All right.
I turned my video off because I wasn't getting audio and I just got audio like a minute ago. So I'll just leave my video off if that's all right.
I think that'll be fine for now. If you do take the floor to speak on an item, you may want to try putting video back on and see if it works.
Okay.
Thanks. And just process-wise, unless you're the speaker, please be on mute. All right. So now we want to open oral communications. At this time, if you wish to speak on an item not on the agenda and you're using the Zoom application, you may raise your hand, use the raise your hand function to indicate your interest in speaking. It's located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're dialing in from a phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. This will create a queue. The meeting host will unmute each speaker, display the timer, and alert you when you may begin. Vin, can you please let us know who are the public comments for oral communications?
Yes, we do have one public comment from Cody. Let me get that set up. Okay, Cody, if you can please restate your name for the record and then proceed with your public comments.
Hello,
Hi, we can hear you.
my name is Cody. I'm a student from Stanford, and I'm calling simply to thank the planning department for ensuring that the public is informed of the public hearings. These are trying times, and I just like to thank the planning department for their efforts. That is all.
Okay, thank you, Cody. We have one more hand raised from a Kristen Flynn. I'm not sure if she wants to speak on oral communications or if she wants to speak on a different item. So let me ask her. Kristen, if you can hear us, can you please state your name for the record and also identify if you want to speak on oral communications or on an agenda item? Hi, Kristen.
He's not unmuted, Vin. She's still on mute, I believe.
Yeah. So I already
got it.
gave her-
Okay, I got it. It's Kirsten Flynn, and I just wanted to speak on the NVCAP.
NVCAP, item number 2. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Cody, for kicking us off with such a positive start to the meeting. I echo your appreciation for the staff and the work they're doing. So let's move on to agenda changes, additions, or deletions. Staff, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no deletions or additions to the agenda. The agenda is got everything we're going to be doing tonight.
Okay. And I had heard some interest offline in changing the order of our agenda items. Is there a motion from a commissioner to hear the golf course item first before the NVCAP?
I can go ahead and make that motion.
All right.
So I move that, I move that we go through agenda item, I think it's 2, for the golf course item first, and then thereafter move.
Rose hedges. It's Rose.
At the NVCAP study session.
Any seconds?
Second.
And that was Commissioner
Gloria.
Suma? Okay.
Commissioner Suma.
Excellent. So we have a motion to hear a golf course item before the NVCAP item and a second. Any discussion? We'll have to use the raise your hand button. And then would it be possible to stop presenting when, I guess not, don't worry about it. Okay, so seeing no hands raised, can we take a vote on, is there a hand? I'm sorry. I can't see any of the commissioners through the presentation. So,
so this is it. I just, I think I've got mute okay, but for some reason my hand raise button is not appearing. So.
Oh dear, that's not good.
So I'm just gonna have to do manual until I get this fixed.
That's okay.
Hey, Carrie, can I make
Yes.
one suggestion?
Yes.
At the top of your Zoom window, and next to something that says in bright green, you are viewing PDS public meetings.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a thing that says view options. And if you click that.
I did a few times and not getting anything.
If you click that view options button, it'll drop down and you'll have a choice to hit side by side. And if you do side by side, you can then view your fellow commissioner's video.
That's
and
excellent.
Also, alternatively, under the video settings at the bottom left, you can also click where it says video. You can click video settings, and down there you can select to hide non-video participants, and then you'll only see the 7 people who are sharing video.
Thank
and
you
that might
so
make
much.
it easier if someone raises their hand like this. You might be able to see it better.
That's perfect. And one more technical detail that we did not review. for the commissioners is the participants button. You'll see the little double person icon is how you access the panel where you can raise and lower your hand. So, okay, any more discussion?
Commissioner Lowing, did you have a comment? Commissioner Lowing, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Thank you. I didn't know you were asking for comments on the item. I thought you were asking for a vote on whether or not we wanted to move it. I just had one comment, and I had suggested to Rachel that perhaps we could get some elevation pictures or drawings, because the only thing from my perspective on this issue is if there's more building exposed, it might look awful from open space. Then that's
Commissioner
something.
Lowing?
Yeah.
Can you hold those comments until we're at that agenda item? We're just talking about moving the agenda item right now in
That's
the
what I
order.
thought. That's
okay.
what I thought. Okay.
Sorry about the confusion. Okay, so let's vote. Can we, the motion is to hear the golf course item first and then the NVCAP item. Although I guess we have to do a voice votes on Zoom calls. Is that correct, Vin?
Yes, that is correct.
All right, can you please?
Absolutely. Commissioner Ochek?
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lowing?
Yes.
Vice Chair Rupavar?
Yes.
Commissioner Suma?
Yes.
Chair Templeton?
Yes.
Okay, this motion passes. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. All right, so the next item is the city official reports. So Rachel, is that?
That is me.
Okay, Ms. Tanner, thank you.
I appreciate your time, and happy to also answer any questions that folks may have now or also at the end of the meeting during commissioner comments and questions. Overall, it's been a little while since we've gotten together, so I'm really excited that we're having our first virtual meeting. The Historic Resources Board and the Architectural Review Board just this month also had their first virtual meetings, and they were very successful. I will be a little nervous tonight because I think technology and the potential for challenges makes me nervous. There's usually always a few, but I'm really happy that you guys all made the time. Hopefully you're all safe as well, and that we can continue to carry on the public business, which is really important despite the pandemic that is occurring. Some of the things that have happened in the last, I guess, 6 weeks since the shelter in place order was first in place is all the operations of the Planning and Development Services Department have moved off-site to virtual communication. So staff thankfully have laptops primarily, those who do desk work, and we're able to then pivot quickly, get the equipment that we needed, have video conferencing. We're using Microsoft here at the city, so we have MS Teams to allow us to do lots of rapid communication and video communication, as well as our VPN, other things to do file sharing. And we even have our phones, our desk phone lines ring through to our laptops. So there really is a lot of seamlessness from the members of the public who need to call, have questions, get services. Obviously, our development center is closed, and that's a place where we had lots and lots of walk-in services provided to folks who are filing building permits or planning entitlements, who may be coming to see things for fire or public works as well. And we're really proud to announce that just, I guess now it was 2 weeks ago, we launched our online permitting system, and that system allows folks to submit their plans online for planning, for building, other departments as well, to receive their comments back digitally, for us to review the plans digitally. So it really is a step forward that we have been looking forward to for several years, and due to the shelter in place, but our need to continue to serve the public in a safe way, we were able to really quickly pull together and make it happen in less than a few weeks. So I'm really proud of that. And if you have friends or colleagues who are wondering what's going on in Palo Alto, can they get a permit? They certainly can go ahead and submit their plans, documents, everything online, which is great. And just today, the County of Santa Clara updated the shelter in place order. It's a lengthy order. If you would like to read it, it has some good information for you and your family, and also information that we in the city are still continuing to digest and understand. One of the big headlines, though, is that construction is allowed. And so we are working together in the city to figure out how we can operationalize that, particularly when it comes to inspections. our building inspectors have been continuing to be performing essential inspections of essential construction projects throughout this time. And I really want to give them a big hand and thanks for putting themselves literally out there on the front lines in a safe way and following the protocols. But we certainly want to remember them, and we're just really grateful for all of their work that they are engaging in. So that's a lot of exciting stuff, more things to come. And the last little bit I'll say before I hand it over to some of our folks from the Office of Transportation is that, housing work continues. And so the legislature the state legislature should be getting back together in early May to meet. They've been on recess since the shelter in place order, or perhaps a little bit before. And so we haven't heard any changes to a lot of the state mandated housing laws or any delays to other state mandated housing regulations. So we still expect, for example, our regional housing needs allocation to come this spring. State laws that affect housing that went into effect this year or go into effect over course of time are still planned to be in effect, and we need to prepare for or adapt to them. There's fortunately a grant deadline that's coming up that will hopefully give us some funds to do some more planning work here in Palo Alto. So that is staying on as schedule. We do have understanding that some of the priorities for the legislature when they return will be obviously responding to COVID, fire season, and also addressing homelessness as top priorities for the state. So that's my update. I want to hand it over to Philip Kamai, who is the director of the Office of Transportation, for an update.
Good evening, commissioners. Can everybody hear me? Great. I see nods. All right. That's good news. Thank you very much for having me tonight. And I have some of my staff here with me. So I just want to share some of the brief updates about things that the Office of Transportation has been working on since this shelter in place and really as kind of interim operations for the Office of Transportation. So I'm going to go through a couple of those, and then I'll hand it off to some of my staff that I have with, and I'll introduce them, of course, first. So the first one is the Office of Transportation is currently developing a pilot program to discourage non-local traffic on some residential streets. And the plan is to discourage drivers other than those that either live on the street or have some business on the street. For example, if they're making a delivery, and of course, if there are emergency services or, they have some kind of business on the street. The roads will not be entirely blocked. So we would only be requesting and encouraging cut through traffic to focus on other routes. And we would not be issuing citations or attempting to enforce this or asking for anybody to admonish somebody that's driving on that street. So it's very similar to programs that have been recently rolled out in Oakland, Minneapolis, and Denver, and I believe San Francisco is actually doing it as well. So again, we'd just be attempting to discourage non-local drivers to reduce and slow traffic and then create more space for allowing for physical distancing and exercising. So if you're walking down the sidewalk and you see somebody walking towards you, you don't have to run back to your house and hide. You could, pass them, but you still need to be mindful on these streets because there could be cars. So bicyclists and pedestrians on these streets really need to be safe and mindful of not just others, but also, if they're entering the street to pass for physical distancing. The second thing that I want to mention is that the city of Palo Alto is currently operating with approximately 24 traffic signals in the downtown area where the automatic pedestrian phases come on without pushing the button. And this is just to allow for the accessible buttons to happen without somebody, doing that that tactile, the touch of it, and risking potentially, or feeling like they need to wear gloves or something like that. And it's in those areas where they're typically high pedestrian. And actually right now it's an unusual pedestrian pattern because we have people making a lot of deliveries and pickups. And so with that, I've got two of my planning and transportation managers here. The first one, many of you have met before, that's Sylvia Starlack, and she manages a lot of our mobility programs, our Safe Routes to School programs, and all kinds of other really great things. So I'll have her go first, but then second, we're going to have Nathan Baird come in. And Nathan Baird is our transportation planning manager that's managing our parking programs that we've all been really excited to have come on board, and actually has quite a lot of stuff that he's planning to bring in the future to the Planning and Transportation Commission. And I just want to say one more thing about him before I turn it over to Sylvia, and then she can pass it to Nate. He actually started his first day, I believe, was the first day of the shelter in place. So in a really unusual fashion, he has been integrated into our team completely virtually, and he's fit in really well. So I'm really excited to introduce him. And with that, I'll hand it off to Sylvia.
Thank you, Philip. Good evening, commissioners. It's nice to see your faces, even just on video. I wanted to update you about 3 things that our Safe Routes to School team has been working on. The first is that when the shelter-in-place order emerged, our Safe Routes to School team was preparing for our busy spring programs in the schools. Our team pivoted quickly to support our students so that they would not miss out on critical safety lessons that they would normally get, even though there's no school. They worked with mybikeskills.com to convert our former 5th grade safety assembly to an online module-based format, complete with a quiz that can be taken at the end of class. Students can even print a certificate at the end of the lesson. We're working on converting our 8th grade Getting to High School event to an online format, as well as our Bringing Up Bicyclists class, which is for parents of elementary school students. So we're converting some of our in-person curriculum to online, and we're really excited about that. It's something we've wanted to do. The second thing is because of shelter in place, we're currently offering one-on-one and group bike safety appointments, presentations, and consultations to reinforce the rules of the road and support physical distancing guidelines. Due to the increased interest in bicycling that's happening on our streets right now, our staff is also serving as thought partners to help families make the right choice when purchasing a family, cargo, toddler, student, or e-bike. There's been an increase in bike purchases. This increased activity on our streets complements our very busy year, which was already a record-setting one for walking and biking to school. And finally, we're very excited about the recent revamp of our Safe Routes to School website. You should all go check it out. We are providing the community with the safety resources needed to accommodate the unprecedented numbers of those walking and biking in our neighborhoods right now. We are pushing these resources out to the community because we realize that many students and families may be taking for granted that our streets are virtually traffic free. And we want to support their safety during the transition out of shelter in place, whenever it happens, by sharing skill building education and materials now. And that's what I have for you today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sylvia. Hello, commissioners. It's nice to meet you all virtually. I am assuming that you guys can hear me and see me just fine. Again, my name is Nathan Baird. I am your new parking manager. I'm excited to get to be working for you all and the city, despite the strange time that I've started here at the city. As Philip was saying, we've got a lot coming for you in the near future. I've really been wrapping my head around all of your parking planning documents that have been kind of rolled out the last 3 to 5 years, and also been kind of really looking into all the background and history of our color zones, our RPPs, the downtown and commercial parking districts that we have, the garages and lots. Because of COVID-19, we have suspended temporarily all our parking restrictions, enforcement, as well as our field operations. That includes valet, on-site permit sales support, contract enforcement, parking sign maintenance. All of that has been temporarily suspended. But like Philip said, we are working hard to queue up a lot of next steps for ourselves to really make an impact and support the local community's quality of life, and support our local businesses once the economy does start getting back online, and once our COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. So yeah, it's really nice to meet you all virtually. It's been a real pleasure working with the team so far, and I look forward to finally getting back to the office for the first time at some point soon. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you so much. Welcome, Nathan. Nate. We're really happy to have you here. And parking is a fun topic of discussion in this city. So we're very excited to have you on board and to meet you through the commission. I would like to open it. If there's any questions that the commissioners have, please use the raise hand. I see Bart, Commissioner Heftman. You can go first, and any other commissioners who wish to ask questions on the city official reports can raise their hand now.
Thank you. This is a question for the transportation group. I saw in the Merc this morning an article that Redwood City was closing a few streets to help with social distancing. And that article mentioned that Palo Alto had already done that, which I hadn't heard. Was that an overstatement or a correct statement? I'm just missing the news.
Yeah, I think people got really excited when it came up at council meeting, but no, we haven't implemented that yet. We're working on the pilot program. Currently, we know which streets we're looking at, and we're working on the details for how we're going to roll it out. And right now, it's really with the chief communications officer who's working on the messaging and all the information. There's an educational component to this as well, because we're not just going to tell pedestrians and bicyclists, go in the street, you're safe to do it. It's really still pay attention, still make sure you're looking both ways if you're going to pass somebody in the street. And this is not, we're not, endorsing people to go out and set up picnic tables in the middle of the street. We're expecting cars will still be driving on the street. We're just hoping that it's a reduced volume. But no, we have not enacted that as of yet.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other commissioners yet, but I wanted to also thank you for working on that program. I'm also interested in the non-local pilot. It's not clear to me if that's the same thing as closing some streets, but whatever it is, I'm glad you're working on it. We definitely have a lot of opportunity to experiment and willingness, I think, from the community to try some of these programs that may have been harder in other times. So we'll take the opportunity. So also thank you to Sylvia Starlack for the Safe Routes work. I'm receiving a lot of updates about that through my children in the school. And also I'm glad to hear that the online plans are now an available option in planning. That's really exciting. So lots of great updates. I really appreciate everybody there. All right, last chance to raise hands if you want to comment on this. Okay, so then are there any public comments?
We don't have any raised hands at the moment, but let's give everyone maybe about 10 seconds to see if anyone wants to raise their hand. If anyone wants to speak on this item, please raise your hand now.
And reminder, if you're dialing in by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. Oh,
okay, so looks like we have one speaker, Winter. One second.
Sorry, I forget to do that, muting. I am assuming that this would be a temporary closure and not permanent in any way. Given that we have a policy of not balkanizing or closing off streets permanently or closing off neighborhoods permanently. So this is a temporary arrangement, which may be really suitable. Can you hear me?
Winter, yes, we can hear you. I'm not sure if staff is allowed to directly respond to that, but noted that it would be helpful for staff to clarify the duration of this experiment and what would happen, what learnings would be take away for the long term, if any.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Winter. Looks like we have no more public speakers, so we can proceed with the agenda.
Certainly, if commissioners did want us to respond to that question by the commissioners asking it, we could respond to that.
That would be wonderful. Could you please respond to that question?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. First, I just want to clarify that the city will not be closing any streets. So there will not be any closures. We'd be looking at encouraging local traffic only. So there might be some barriers, but we'll not be completely closing any streets. What we'd be doing is just asking local traffic only to be using the streets, but not enforcing. That said, it would be, of course, temporary. It would really be during this time of the shelter in place. And, of course, at this point, to be determined when that ends, but it looks like at least through the rest of the remainder of this month. And then we'll see. And this is going to be a pilot. I think we're going to probably try it on 3 street segments at this initial pilot and kind of see how it goes and get some feedback. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the public hearing on the 3000 Alexis Drive.
Great, thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Chair. I'm going to turn this over to our Chief Planning Official, Amy French. She is going to introduce the project and our planner on the project, and then we'll have a presentation by the planner. We also have, because it is a hearing, up to a 10-minute presentation by the applicant, which we will be sharing slides with that presentation, and then of course can turn it over to the commission for perhaps questions, public comment, and then commission deliberation and decision. So Amy, take it away.
Good evening, commissioners. Sheldon Ussing is here with us today, as are the applicants for this project. So Sheldon will share his screen to show the staff presentation, and will be followed by the applicant's presentation. So that's all I had to say. And thank you, commissioners, for taking on a public hearing during the COVID timeline. Thank you. Sheldon?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, Sheldon, not to cut you off, Sheldon. One thing maybe I'll say more, just as this is our first public hearing, we are really excited to keep bringing items before the commission and before all of our boards and commission to move forward. And so we're excited to see, get folks ready so that, well, initially we're thinking when construction is allowed, they can get their shovels in the ground and get to work. Little did we know construction would be allowed as of today. And so I'm not sure, although apparently golf courses still are not allowed under the local county order, though the state order did allow golfing. So we'll see if they can figure out what that means. So during this time, it's a good time for the golf course to put forward their work and hopefully get that underway. So perhaps by the time that the work is finished, maybe it can be time to go golfing again. So we're excited to bring this forward and keep this project moving ahead. Take it away, Sheldon.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. One more thing before we get started, Sheldon. As is quasi-judicial, do we need to do disclosures, or does anyone have anything to disclose? Any conflicts? Okay. All right. Now it's on you, Sheldon.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me here to present the project. Sheldon Ussing, planner. So this is a recommendation of a site and design review for the renovation of an 18-hole golf course at 3000 Alexis Drive. And so I do have a PowerPoint presentation, and then the applicant does have a presentation which I will also control. So just in summary, kind of overall, there are renovations to this 18-hole golf course, which the goal is to seek improvement of the playing conditions, the drainage, and maintenance of the facility. And the applicant intends to complete the project within 2 phases to minimize disruption in the area. And then this will also result in a reduction in impervious surface areas. So specific improvements would include some grading to update the existing greens, the tees, fairways, sand bunkers, and also to add a short game practice area. And there'll be upgrades to the irrigation system for efficiencies and try to reuse some of the heads where they can do so. Also be a replacement of certain golf course pathways with pervious surfaces such as decomposed granite. And then the installation of some flat work for a small patio expansion at the clubhouse. So they'll be using some pervious pavers there. A little background of the site facility. The golf course was constructed in 1961, and it's on over 128 acres. It's a pretty large parcel there. Its additions were made in 2009 following the site design review and conditional use permit by the city that enabled a clubhouse addition and a fitness facility. And the approval of these conditions included transportation demand management plan, and also included membership limits, and verified through the club that these are not exceeded today. So they're still maintaining those conditions. The process, and just to understand here, is that it's a site design review. There isn't any need to amend the CUP because the CUP does allow a commercial recreation use in the OS, as well as they're not intending on changing any other operations. This is a site that will include a staff architectural review concurrent with this process, and that's for some of the landscaping and patio expansion, which are deemed to be minor changes to the council approved plans back in 2008. So we will do that concurrently after a recommendation from the PTC. This will be recommended to the council and placed on the consent calendar, and that will be the process. A little bit about the setting here. It's located in the foothills west of Interstate 280. It's surrounded by some large properties, single family homes to the east and south, and also abuts a natural reserve area. The views of the property are limited from the adjacent streets. There's a lot of berming up, and the actual golf course is kind of down in elevation. There would be views from the backyards of these neighboring homes. And some of these homes do have two-story components that take advantage of the views to the golf course. And some would say that those are premium views. So consistency with the site and design review, there's no change of use requested. The use is allowed via the existing CUP. There's no site or facilities expansion. The site modifications do not require CUP. The previous area will be reduced by about 14,000 square feet. And the previous area does include the buildings, a parking lot, golf court pathways, and flat work. The reduction would result going from 6.5% to 6.25% with previous pavers and decomposed granite. Doesn't seem like a whole lot, but when you're looking at a very large site, that is an improvement. There will also be tree protection ongoing throughout the project. There were 71 protected trees surveyed. 4 of the protected trees would be proposed to be removed, and these are in decline in health. Also, 35 non-protected trees would be proposed for removal. And the applicant proposed to plant 132 trees, 62 redwoods and 70 oaks to be proposed on the site throughout. And these are the findings that are required by the council to make and for the planning commission to recommend. I'll spare reading through them, but those are in your packet. The project pursuant to CEQA is exempt for minor alterations to land. The degrading on the land is less than 10% of slope. Site average is 8.8%. And that all of the cubic yards of grading with nearly 40,000 square feet of cut, fill, are balanced on site. So there's no soil that's being transferred on or off. There's no trucks going on the streets. It'll be all taken on the property. So recommendation this evening is approval of the proposed project to the City Council based on the findings and subject to the Commission's approval. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant has their presentation. They also have some slides regarding those photos that the Commissioner mentioned regarding elevations. So thank you.
Sheldon, who should I unmute?
Brian Costello.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, Brian, if you can unmute on your end, you may speak.
Unmuted. Thank you, Sheldon. Commissioners and staff, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to present our partial renovation of the 18-hole golf course at Palo Alto Hills Golf and Country Club, which we've titled Transforming a 1960s Design into the Modern Era and Beyond. And there's a nice image in the lower right of the title there, the title slide, showing you kind of the context of the golf course and the surrounding community. Next slide. This is our project team of professionals, the left column, the center column, and then we also have some representatives from the club. This is a partial list. It's really been a a team effort. I would like to point out that two of our consultants, Jeff Froke, our environmental consultant, and Russ Mitchell and Associates, both worked on the city's Baylands golf course project. And for them and everybody else, we really welcome everything that was put into this presentation into the packet to date. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a brief overview. Sheldon mentioned some of these items, but the club was founded in 1958. The first 9 holes opened in 1960, and then the following year, in 1961, the final 9 holes to complete the 18 was completed. So we're dealing with essentially a 60-year-old golf course design, and it needs to be brought up to modern standards. And a lot of the components of the golf course have a natural life cycle, and those need to be replaced with new technologies. So we're replacing the irrigation system with a new state-of-the-art design. That should realize about a 3 to 5% savings. We're also doing some improvements with drainage. Sheldon mentioned about the cart paths, and then all the golf course features are going to be built to United States Golf Association standards. Turf selection improvements, we're continuing to maintain the turf reduction that's already been put in place. Andrew Morgan, the golf course superintendent, has reduced the overall irrigated turf from about 86 acres to 65 acres, which represents a 25% reduction in irrigated turf, and we're going to continue to use that footprint. We're also using disease and drought resistant varieties of turf grass. We'll be enhancing native areas, and then we'll be restoring kind of the native trees and the character of the site by removing some of the diseased Monterey pines and replacing those with the oaks and redwoods at nearly a 4-to-1 ratio. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of a deeper look into the Monterey pines and the situation. There's a couple images there where you can see where these very majestic groves of Monterey pines have succumbed to the pitch canker disease. And so there's been some concerns obviously associated with that, because the tree limbs could fall on players or staff. It also exposes the golf course with adjacent holes to wayward shots or intentional shortcuts for that matter. So we're replacing the trees that are removed with 132, again, oaks and redwoods, and they'll provide directional screening and, safety screening and directional influence. Next slide, please. So this was a picture in the upper right that was taken just yesterday, and this is looking from about the beginning of the first fairway back towards the clubhouse, which is on the right-hand side and the first tee. And then on the left-hand side of the image is the 9th green. And then the bottom image is a rendition of what conditions would look like near maturity in that same area. So the intent with this planting is to restore in-kind natural massings and groves, and not necessarily try to create a linear wall of trees. Next slide, please. This is about, again, what some statistics that Sheldon had mentioned, 39,750 cubic yards. Everything balances on site. There's no import or export. And the area that the project is involved is about 36 acres, which represents about 28% of the overall site. Next slide, please. This is an earthwork and view analysis. This base information here was something that our geotechnical consultant had requested of us last year to help them identify where some of our deeper fills and cuts were. So some of these colored areas you're seeing on this image show exactly where those are. So in the overall footprint of 36 acres, the areas that have a little bit more grading are very, very small as an overall percentage. So then we took this base information and applied kind of a view analysis of what you might see from the golf course from the adjacent properties. So starting just below the Palo Alto Hills Golf and Country Club logo in the upper right-hand corner. That's where the parking lot and the clubhouse is located. And you see there's kind of minor grading around the clubhouse. If you work your way clockwise around to the bottom right, that's the southernmost tip of the golf course, and that's not visible from the open space due to topography and vegetation. Then if you move right to left towards the bottom, that's the part of the golf course that's adjacent to the Arrastradero Preserve. And there's either very little that's visible, or you wouldn't see it because it's minor grading. And then working around to the left-hand side of the photo, that's the north end of the property. If anything, we're doing a little cutting there. So we're never creating artificial mounds or anything like that to try to hide anything. We're trying to really be responsive to the natural topography. And then if you work your way to the top of the photograph, say around 12 o'clock, and then work down to 6 o'clock, that is a natural spine or kind of a high plateau that has an eastern aspect, so it tips away from the open space. And the same thing with holes 1 and 9, which is kind of the bottom leg of that ties back up to the clubhouse. That has very limited visibility, and the grading again is these just isolated pockets. Next slide, please. This is a view analysis from the open space. So this is the Arrastradero Preserve on your left. You can see the logo for Palo Alto Heroes. That's where the golf course kind of fits into the preserve. These pictures were also taken yesterday. Image A was taken from the parking lot looking south towards the golf course. And then from this particular photograph, you can't see the course. On the bottom, image B, that was taken from the intersection of De Anza and Meadowlark Trail. It gives a good panorama. You can see a little bit of the golf course at the north end on the left-hand side of the photograph. Again, that area we're doing a little bit of cut, so if anything, that might be lowered. And in the center part of the photograph, we're not doing any grading in that area that you can see in that gap. Next slide, please. This is Foothills Park in the map, and this are also pictures that we took yesterday. The top image was taken from Bobcat Point, which is in the north corner there on the right-hand side. You can't see the golf course in this particular representative image. And then from B, that's from Panoramic Trail and a cul-de-sac intersection, also at the boundary of the park. This is from a drone taken from about 80 to 100 feet in the air, just to prove that, yes, there is a golf course there just over the horizon, but if you were actually at grade level, at least at this point, you wouldn't be able to see the course. But you can't see the clubhouse in this drone shot for perspective on the right-hand side, and then the left side, you do catch some glimpses of the golf course. Next slide. So this is the last slide in the presentation. And again, just to reiterate some of the key points, we're updating a 60-year-old golf course designed to more modern standards. We're going to be introducing new component technology. We're continuing with turf selection improvements that are disease and drought resistant. And then we're going to be restoring more of the native trees for the property. So thank you very much. And we'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much, both of you, for the presentations. I'm going to open it up to commissioners. Please raise your hand with the raise hand function, and we'll go in order I see them. So Commissioner Heckman. So the first part of the questions, what we're going to do now are going to be questions to the presenters. Then we're going to have public comment, and then we can talk about opinions, the opinions portion. So, right.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for the applicant. I see in the staff packet and in your plan set that you are going to be reorienting to some extent some of your fairways and greens. What I couldn't tell, and I'd like you to comment on, is whether we need to be concerned that any of that reorientation might have the effect of more errant golf shots, either landing in the adjacent homes or the adjacent street or trails on adjacent open space.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. Sheldon, do you have the opportunity to jump to slide 12? So this is a proposed design overlay, and there really isn't any significant change as far as the positioning of the golf course. We're really trying to respect the existing corridors. The only real difference, and it's subtle, is the introduction of a par 3, hole number 7, that's adjacent to Alexis. And it's really kind of borrowing the tee location from the existing hole number 8. The setback is per industry standards, and it shouldn't present a problem. And every other alignment of the golf holes remains essentially in the same corridor. So I hope that answers or addresses your concern about that.
It does. Thank you.
All right. Any other commissioners have questions? Please raise your hands now. Okay. So now we should open the floor for public comments. Please use the raise hand feature to indicate if you have a public comment, or press *9 if you're dialed in.
Chair Templeton.
Yes.
Before we proceed, can you confirm if you wanted to give members of the public 3 minutes or 5 minutes for this item?
I think 3 minutes should be, we said it earlier in there that we're going to use 3 minutes today.
Okay, sure. So our first speaker will be Jeff Rope, and then afterwards we have Winter. 1 second, let me get Jeff on the line. Okay, Jeff, if you're there, you can unmute your microphone and speak.
Yes, I had not intended to speak. However, I may have misspoken when I signed up. However, I am available to answer any questions as one of the project team, particularly regarding any environmental or ecological concerns, environmental aspects of the golf course.
Okay, so to confirm, you have no public comments for this item, is that right?
Yes, Ben, he's part of the project team for the golf
Okay,
course.
gotcha. Okay, in that case, up next we have Winter. Winter, your microphone's unmuted. If you can unmute on your end, you can speak.
Yes, I have a question and a comment. My question is, could you say again the trees that would be coming out, are they all Monterey pines? And oh, I'm sorry. My question is, are the trees coming out all Monterey pines? Are there oaks? Are there native trees coming out too? I would like that clarified. And if native trees, mature are coming out, I would like to know how many of what native trees you would want to remove. And my suggestion is, I have been to the club on several occasions, and I know the tiered parking lot situation, and there surely would be room in the tiered parking lot for planting of canopy trees in a reasonably spaced and rational way to provide cooling of that parking lot, because right now it's just tier after tier after tier after tier coming up of that hillside that gets really hot, and there's no cooling of that. And I think that would be a very good addition to this project, providing habitat, carbon sequestration, all of those other good things, but also cooling down what is a really, really hot area leading up to your wonderful clubhouse. That's my question, and that is my suggestion. That's all.
All right, Ven, do we have any other public comments on this agenda item?
We have no more raised hands.
All right, technology giveth and taketh away. All right, so we'll move on
Okay,
to
sorry about
comments.
that. We have no more raised hands, so we can proceed.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's move on to commissioner comments. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak to this item. Commissioner Suma?
Thank you very much, and thank you, staff and applicant, for the application. I also had a couple questions about the trees, and one is I appreciate that planting of native trees, which will naturally do very well there. But I also just wanted to encourage you to plant large trees, because the ones that you're replacing, the Monterey pines that you showed, while they may be ailing from the pitch canker disease, also are still providing, I would assume, some visual screening. So I would just encourage you to plant large enough trees. And I also have been to this club more than once. And I do think the parking lot, as a member of the public said, could benefit very much from some native trees as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Suma. Now Commissioner Lowing.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I had requested, and you provided very quickly, some nice pictures of what that's going to look like afterwards. Of the 4 findings, that was the only one that I had concerns about, just because I didn't know. You definitely said that you weren't going to be changing the architecture, so I wasn't expecting an extra story that had to be dealt with when I'm walking through a rastradero. But I didn't know if the removal of some landscape might, create an issue. It looks like you've been extraordinarily sensitive to that, and I appreciate you moving quickly to show us those pictures so that we have confidence making the correct recommendation to the public and to the council. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners wish to speak on this item? Please raise your hand.
Very quickly.
I would like to just share a few comments that I appreciate that you're only removing the unhealthy trees and that you're planting so many new trees. If you wish to respond to the question about what kinds of trees, I see Commissioner Heckman next. What kind of trees are being removed, please let me know. I'd be happy to hear that. And also appreciate that you're reducing the amount of irrigated turf. That seems very, very responsible. So to the applicant, did you want to say any more about the trees?
Yeah, am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. To the first question, and I hope I get them all, perhaps you can remind me if I don't, but that all the trees that are being removed are non-native pines. The majority are the Monterey pines. There are a few Italian stone pines and a few Canary Island pines. Canary Island pines, stone pines, but the majority is the Monterey pines. The types or the sizes of trees we're following urban forestry's guidelines for the ratio depending on the size or the caliper of the trunk of the trees. So we're planting 48-inch, 36-inch, and 24-inch box trees. And all that information has been provided in the documentation we've submitted to date.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So I first want to acknowledge that golf courses, public and private, are a very important open space feature of Palo Alto, and it's important to properly manage our open space. And so I'm pleased that the golf course is really taking this step to manage and beautify the green space. We're not here talking about the buildings. And also I want to acknowledge that the way they've done it, their proposal here is really, to me, checks all of the environmental sensitive boxes. They have balanced their cut and fill so that there's not going to be any trucks bringing soil onto the site or taking it away. I think that's great. They are reducing the impervious coverage by about 14,000 square feet. As Sheldon pointed out, it's only a 0.25, but we're talking about 128 acres, so it's substantial. They are removing 39 trees. All of them are one type of pine or another, and they are replacing them with 132 oaks, which, as I understand, is 20 more than they're required by our ordinances to do. And there's a variety of oaks. And so, again, I think that's the right way to do it. And I learned tonight from Mr. Costello's presentation that they are reducing by 25% the amount of irrigated turf, which should mean more water savings and a better water conservation approach. So I think all of those things are terrific. And I wanted to just acknowledge that it appears to me that the team that put this together really did their homework and has brought us something that I feel I can recommend to the council wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Heckman. Any other commissioners wish to speak on this item? I was wondering, Sheldon, if you could present your staff recommendation slide so that we can entertain any motions about that. Okay, any motions? Please raise your hand. Commissioner Alchek?
Yeah, I'll make a recommendation that we approve the proposed project. We recommend approval of the proposed project to the City Council based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval.
Any seconds? Commissioner Lowing?
Yes, I'm happy to second that motion.
All right, any discussion? Do either of you want to speak to the motion?
I'll just say that I think Commissioner Heckman really articulated what I was thinking.
Yeah, ditto. Absolutely. Just a superb design. And I think there was a bit of a template on the golf course in Palo Alto, the former municipal, now Baylands. And it's good to have some of the folks that even learned lessons live there working on this one as well. So I think it looks good all the way around.
Excellent. Last call for comments or discussion on this item before we vote. Please raise your hand. Commissioner Lowing? Oh, okay. So Ben, can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Commissioner Alchek?
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lowing?
Yes.
Vice Chair Rupavar?
Yes.
Commissioner Suma? Commissioner Suma?
You're muted.
Yes, sorry.
Chair Templeton?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for a great presentation. I appreciate it. And we will move on to the next agenda item. Thank you to all of those who are hanging on until we are able to discuss the NVCAP. So we are ready for the presentation. And is that Ms. Tanner?
Great, thank you very much, Commissioner and Chair Templeton. So I am going to be presenting the NVCAP presentation. So let me get that up here and share my screen. And let me enlarge that. And does everyone see a screen North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan that has green background? Excellent, great. Good evening. I'm really excited to present on this project this evening. We also have Chitra Moitra on the line on the Zoom with us. She is the staff planner who's been supporting this project since its inception and has lots of history. We also have another new associate planner, Nicole Loyola. She's not on the Zoom this evening, but she's also been providing support to this project. I became the project manager for this project when Elena Lee departed the city last August. And so I'm a relative newcomer compared to Chitra and our working group members, but I'm really excited to be part of it and really privileged to be part of this really important work that Palo Alto citizens, you all, the council, et cetera, are undertaking. I want to give a big shout out and notice to our working group members. There are many of them who are actually on the line right now who are part of the Zoom. I'm going to just see if I can see who's there. Although with my screen share, I'm not sure how to get to my panel anymore. So I will tell you who I saw beforehand and who I can remember. I believe that we had Kirsten Flynn, we have Angela De La Porta, who's one of our chairs, one of our two co-chairs. We have Keith Rechtel and Alex Liu. Keith is also on our Parks and Recreation Commission and Alex on our Architectural Review Board. So I want to thank them for doing double duty, along with Commissioner Suma, who is a member of the working group who was preceded in that by Commissioner Temple or Chair Templeton before she was on, I think, the PTC role. And I think we had some other members there and other folks who've been following this project. So I'm really, really thankful to all of them for their work. This process has gone on longer than we told them it was going to when they signed up. And so we really thank them for hanging in there with us. And there are a number of members of the working group who, for whom it's their first real foray into public service or into a public board or advisory body. And I think that's really great. And I hope that they don't get frustrated, but they see the power they have and the chance to really impact their community and stick with it. And I also want to recognize the City Council for helping to initiate this process. And of course, we have a great team of consultants led by Perkins and Will and supported by Arup, Strategic Economics, Plan to Place, also Rincon and WRA, and Page and Turnbull, who've done some work for this project. So I say that in part to let you know that this work is not my own. It is the work of many, many, many people, and I'm doing my best this evening to present it to you tonight. And I do just want to have one note. You will notice the page numbers of this presentation are not in order. We had some technical difficulties with a couple really dense slides, and so we're not able to present those tonight in the slide presentation, but we do have those available. They were part of your packet. So if you notice the pages get kind of weird, get high fast, that is why. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about the goals, vision, and the process of this NVCAP. So the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan is going to be a regulatory document that captures the vision for a roughly 60-acre area of Palo Alto. It's an area that's bounded by El Camino, Page Mill, Lambert, and Park Boulevard / Caltrain. Caltrain's kind of on the side there, but Park Boulevard runs through with a little sliver between Park and the Caltrain Boulevard sliver of land there. The 2030 comprehensive plan, which was adopted, I believe, in 2017, outlined that this would be a priority in program L4.10.1 of the comp plan. And that stated that this would be a walkable neighborhood with multifamily housing, ground floor retail, a public park, creek improvements, and an interconnected street grid. The idea in that program is that this plan would guide development towards a well-designed mixed-use district with diverse land uses and pedestrian-oriented streets. And so we started this project, I think, with a really good blueprint from that comp plan of what this project would do and what the purpose of this project is. And the purpose tonight of this meeting is to begin the PTC's engagement through a study session of understanding what has been done to date and some of the dynamics of the project and the site, and specifically look at 3 draft alternatives and other aspects of the project, and hopefully for you to provide comment, but also for those members of the public who are weighing in to also provide their feedback on the project, on the draft alternatives, and on where we go from here. So the staff report includes a thorough review of the activities that have been taken to date and on our path that we are on. So I'll just summarize them very briefly here. We again started with the comprehensive plan, and then in 2017 in November, we applied for and successfully received and accepted a federal grant, at which time the City Council also initiated the area planning process in accordance with the rules of the Palo Alto Municipal Code. We then, in March of the following year, Council adopted project goals. followed by the next month appointing a 14-member working group, and then selecting a prime consultant that summer. And in the fall of 2018, we kicked off the project officially with Perkins and Will and staff leading the working group through a process. Along the way, we've also had several meetings with decision-making bodies and also with advisory bodies. So we've met with City Council, Historic Resources Board, the Parks and Recreation Committee, and the City School Committee. So where we are tonight is over on the left in the refine as we head in towards the spring and the summer. So we had a workshop in February where we talked about the 3 draft alternatives and had about 50 members of the public out to partake in activities and give their feedback. We also created a survey which closed this month, opened and closed this month, to also get more feedback on those alternatives that were presented at the workshop to make space for those who weren't able to come in person to be able to still give their feedback. We're having our PTC meeting tonight, and then we'll have a working group meeting next month where we are also expecting to get lots of feedback from folks. We have a homework assignment, which I shared with you all via email. You can take a look at their homework, and we're looking forward to really hearing from them what they think about the alternatives that we've presented. In addition, we've had 5 working group members create alternatives inspired by kind of this whole process that also provide another point for us to reflect and kind of think about what we want to do. And the whole goal really is kind of what is sometimes unflatteringly called, sausage making, but it's really taking the parts of everything, mixing it all together. Some things get left behind, some things stay in, and ultimately we have hopefully one preferred alternative, which is what we hope to bring to City Council. Now, we may not be bringing one preferred alternative to City Council. Maybe we'll narrow down from all the alternatives just to 2, go to City Council and get further direction and have them to help guide us on kind of this is the direction that they more want to go. We can then do a few studies of that alternative that's selected, come to the PTC again for a recommendation before taking that recommendation to City Council to be the preferred alternative that becomes the draft plan. Documents get written, we have the environmental assessment, and then council adoption. So you can see there's a lot of sausage making left. And so I know there's a lot that we will be presenting tonight and that was in the staff report. So thank you again for dipping your toes into this project. So we've made a lot of progress and it's really started here looking at these goals that we have. So you can see here on the left-hand side, the City Council goals that were adopted in March 2018. You can see they track a lot with the different outcomes or goals that were outlined in the comprehensive plan. And then on the right-hand column, you can see the working group vision. This is a portion of the working group's vision that was crafted with lots of help and leadership from Angela De La Porta, who led the working group through a great exercise to really pull out, the goals I think have a great goalpost for us, housing and land use, transportation, bike and pedestrian. But the vision really is a narrative that really kind of brings to life what it is that we're seeking to create in the NBCAP and kind of a little bit of the why. Why did these things matter? And what would that look and feel like if it were to be realized? Some of the things that stick out are the idea of a European style town square with an open plaza, the idea that buildings designs would fit well into the existing context, and they might range from 3 to 6 stories, be interconnected with bicycle and pedestrian paths. There'd be local serving retails like cafes, local markets, maybe even a theater. And there'd be a lot of lively foot traffic that'd be drawn to these uses and to the area that has diverse housing opportunities. And importantly, not a lot of intrusion from cars into this wonderful town square and this vibrant and bustling area. So that's the vision we're going for. And I think if we continue to be collaborative and work together, make some compromises, we definitely will get there. So this section is going to by no means do justice to the rich history or the present character of the Ventura neighborhood. And I hope that not only the staff report, but other documents and maybe even some of our public commenters can speak to really the vibrancy of the area, the importance of the area in Palo Alto, and the unique neighborhood that it is beyond just some of the characteristics of the location. So it's a very diverse area in Palo Alto. It's majority white, but has a significant Asian population at 38%. Black population is about 3%, and those of other races are about 1%. And even though it's a small African-American population, it's significantly larger than other parts of the city. In terms of tenancy, it's 55% renter occupied and 45% homeowner occupied, which is a little bit different than the balance of most other, if you look at the city as a whole, the balance tends to shift the other way. And then lastly, in terms of educational attainment, we've got about 67% of those who are over age 25 have a bachelor's degree or higher. So again, an educated area, but also one of those areas that has been for a long time in Palo Alto, seen as a more affordable neighborhood. Again, affordability is very relative in the Bay Area here. But I think that legacy of being affordable, being a place where people can access housing, having maybe some smaller lots than some other parts of Palo Alto, making it more affordable. Affordability has been a really key priority for the working group, for the community members, ensuring that people of diverse incomes, of diverse work and kind of careers can live here in Palo Alto, and that this be a neighborhood where they can live or perhaps continue to live or move if they are not able to live in other parts of Palo Alto. In terms of land use, the area is got a lot of diverse land uses as well. You can see across the Caltrain is dominated by single family homes, but here in the project area, which is outlined here in this black box here, you can see that there's a lot of commercial service here wrapping kind of down Lambert Avenue and onto El Camino Real. You also see that there's quite a bit of research and office park, and this of course here being the Stanford Research Park. It's also adjacent to the California Cal Ave Business District. And this red dotted line here that you can see outlining a larger area, that is the California Avenue Priority Development Area. And that is a kind of regional planning designation indicating that this is an area where the city council has said, as we have increased population and need to grow regionally, this is a place with its adjacency to transportation and to jobs that would be a good place to have some growth be located. So to put a little bit more context on the uses here, you can see this, this map, which shows some of the existing uses, purple being office uses, this light pink here being personal services, the darker pink being neighborhood serving commercial retail. And you can also see the single family homes here on Olive, and then wrapping around here, Pepper and Ash Street having the single family homes. This building here at the corner of Page Mill and Park Boulevard is the headquarters for Cloudera. And so they have an office here, they have a surface parking lot, and then also a parking structure here. And then 340 Portage, which is the building that until very recently at the end of last year had Fry's Electronics and also has other office uses mixed there. I will note that there should be a significant portion, about 60,000, 70,000 square feet of this building designated as the dark pink and having retail uses because it is designated as an office and a retail building. The black outlines on this map indicate a site that is a housing opportunity site. So for example, you can kind of see it wrapping around this site here, this block here, and throughout the plan area. The housing opportunity sites are identified in our certified housing element as areas where we can build housing when we need to meet our regional housing needs allocation. That allocation, which comes out periodically, we're about to get our next allocation for the next 8-year cycle, indicates how much housing a city or jurisdiction would need to build over that 8-year time period to accommodate the projected population growth for that region or for that jurisdiction. And so when you add up all the sites that we identify as housing opportunity sites, it equals the number of units that are in our RHNA allocation. If you look at all these sites in black, it equals about 354 realistic yield of units that we think could have gone here based on our most recent housing element. If you look at this map, you can see a bit of the common and contiguous ownership of land in this area. So compared to SOFA 1, which resulted when the Palo Alto Medical Foundation relocated, this plan doesn't have single land ownership from one landowner. And so it really is a collaboration between the community, between the city, between the property owners, between the neighbors, residents, tenants, a lot of stakeholders who have an interest in what goes on here. And it's not just kind of one landowner and then kind of the city and community negotiating with that entity. You can see the Cloudera site here is a large site, the largest site being 340 Portage, again, where the Fry's is, which also includes some additional and adjacent parcels. You can see it crosses the creek here. And I think, not to leave out some of the obvious characteristics of the area, it's located on a very high capacity street, El Camino Real, that has frequent bus service. It's located near Caltrain, which is commuter service, which also not only the service to that stop, but also served by the Stanford Research Park and the Marguerite Shuttle, and also has a wonderful creek that's flowing through it that right now is channelized and not showing its natural beauty, but again, is a great natural resource that we have. And also, again, all the wonderful families who live here and the folks who work here in the project area. So I want to get a little bit this evening into some of the plan elements. Again, I know there are a lot of topics that I won't be touching on in my oral presentation, but I do welcome the commissioners to ask questions about them. And so we're going to start out by looking at some of the building typologies that were proposed. Again, I do apologize. I have some great renderings of these buildings that have a lot more life and detail. Those were the slides that were crashing the program, so I will not be able to show those on screen this evening. But again, if you do have questions, please let me know and I can make sure you also have those slides in a non-crashing your computer format. So the building typologies that we have here are 5 typologies. They're starting here in this box. There are townhomes, which are 3 stories, attached units that have parking at grade underneath. So you can see that little gray box there. That's where the person might drive down this center aisle and park their car beneath. Then they may have a front stoop here and kind of front green area. We have the low-rise greenway, which is a 4-story building. It's about 107 dwelling units per acre. It would be parked at 1 parking space per unit. And the idea is the parking would be underground. And you can see again that there's also provided green space around this building here. Then you have 3 buildings that look a little similar, a low-rise block, neighborhood serving commercial, and then a mid-rise block. So this low-rise block is 4 stories tall. And I know some folks do not believe that low-rise is 4 stories, and I think that's totally fine. We can come up with terminology that fits our community better. The typical density here would be 124 dwelling units per acre, and it would be for sale or could be work as rental, but most of these were modeled as, they're modeled both as for sale and rental. Again, 1 parking space per unit, and there would be a center courtyard here. This building is very similar, but it's 5 stories with neighborhood serving commercial on the ground floor. And part of the reason for the increased height there is to offset having that space that was dedicated to rental uses or housing uses becoming retail use. And so that's the additional floor there. And then we have an 8-story mid-rise block, again, to think about something, what if we were to do something at a higher scale or higher density? What might that look like, and where would members of our community and yourself as commissioners think that would be appropriate or not appropriate in Palo Alto? That typical density is about 159 dwelling units per acre, and you'd note that it steps back here at the 6th floor. So trying to give a little bit more air and light to the street. So all of these, you will note, are pretty boring buildings, or as we thought, Lego looking buildings. The idea again is that these are massing models. These are not the architectural details of what the buildings would look like. Really, you could have these buildings in terms of density or general shape look like anything. They could be looking like more modern buildings. We could do kind of a faux historic look. Can go to really any architectural styles we want, but we really wanted to focus on, you know, what type of heights, what type of relationship to the street, the open space do we want, and we can have the architectural conversation as we continue this process. I won't go into detail on these slides, but they are here in case we want to return to them, really just looking at the financial feasibility analysis conducted by Strategic Economics that really looked at what is the average kind of market sales price of these properties and what's feasible. You can also see here some of the community benefits that are provided by that. So this townhome model, for example, would have 3 below market rate units provided on site. If they are building the units on site, they wouldn't be doing the in lieu fee. These are modeled as ownership. And so you can see that the park revenue fee would be about $147,000. And so that's a way to think about how the community benefits we might yield from these different development types. And you can see, for example, here they looked at the mid-rise with the retail as rental, and it was not feasible. So this is the type of exercise that was gone through. State the obvious, with COVID-19 and the economy, I think we all have somewhat of a question mark about what the immediate future for the construction industry look like, for housing, for retail, for office, all of these things. So I want to state we know that we don't know what's coming, but we hope that this project has a 10 to 20 year really future looking lifespan, and so that we can be flexible and really create a plan that could adapt to what changes might happen in the economy. So this is an idea, complete community metrics. One of the working group exercises was to present and provide example cities or areas that the working group liked to use as precedent to say, what are some areas that we might want to emulate as we move forward with the NBCAP? And so you have here in green is the NBCAP itself area. You have the yards, Emeryville, University Avenue, Oak Park, the Pearl District, and Central Square. And so then you have these different bars that are looking, what's the population density of those areas? What's the job density of those areas? What about retail services? And then this over here is intersection density, which is a measure of thinking about how walkable an area is if there's a lot of intersections and points where pedestrians or bicyclists can cross and connect to different uses. And so you can see the NBCAP and Cal Ave area kind of here in different regards and different relationship to these metrics. And so what our consultants did was kind of use that to say, okay, well, if we're going to try to have this really vibrant, walkable place, how do we measure up compared to some of these other places that we really liked? And you can see in terms of retail sales and services, we're pretty on par with where we need to go. And so maybe if we calibrate our growth of retail sales and services, that would be great. No surprise, there's a lot of job density there, right across the street from the Research Park near Cal Ave. There are quite a lot of jobs in the area already, but really looking at a vibrancy target of having more people living in the area, that will bring, again, that cover that walkable population, people who are walking to work, and people who are using those shops and the retail that we want to see there. So with that, I will get into the 3 different draft alternatives that we have to discuss this evening. So alternative 1 is the minimum as per the comprehensive plan. And so just to kind of orient you to how these are laid out, you obviously have the key up here that tells you the different types of housing, and then a key over here, which will change on the next page, even though it'll be on the same alternative. And you can see the total number of housing units is 514, but that's an addition of 386 through the buildings that are part of this plan. We also have an office space is actually a decrease because some of the buildings here have office uses, and in this model, they have been turned into housing instead of office. And similar with the retail, some of the retail uses are going away and becoming housing. There is open space here that is perhaps publicly accessible, though privately owned, but we're not able to get to our publicly owned kind of centralized park that we want in this model, primarily because we're not really seeing a lot of development. We're seeing, again, about 386, which is just a little bit more than the comprehensive plan calls for. And in terms of residents, kind of how many people do we think might live in those units? An additional 926 people. Jobs might be about 822 employees. And that's really looking at the ratio of jobs per space. And so, you know, different office and retail have different jobs per space. And of course, those numbers can be debated as to what is the better way. And definitely in a post-COVID environment, how many people will be in offices? I don't know, and how far away they will be is your guess is probably as good as mine. In that you can see these are distributed between townhomes and apartment style buildings. Alternative 2 is prioritizing portage. And so this really was a strong idea that I think is has a lot of traction in the working group, is that, you know, really if Portage Avenue could become kind of a main street that really is part of this central core for the vibrancy of the neighborhood, that would be a goal that we want to try to achieve. And one of the ideas is to reconnect Portage, but to have this portion here right in front of the 340 Portage building, that might be pedestrian or bicycle access only, perhaps closed off with bollards or some other means to make sure that cars are not driving there. So it really becomes that there's retail here, looking over here, people are passing from this kind of park alongside the creek over to the retail, back and forth. And then this park over here, if we did have a path along the creek, it would come over here. And right in this area is where the expansion of Bulware Park is slated to be, near the AT&T building and the part of land that the city just purchased last year. So there could really be this nice kind of green connection across Lambert Avenue and into the plan area. Again, you see more buildings here along El Camino. You see that there's some retail here, again, on Portage as kind of this main street with some townhome buildings coming online here. A parking structure in part to be able to take the parking here. And where were those workers and visitors who are coming to 340 Portage Park? If they're coming not from within walking distance of the neighborhood, it would be in this area. There's also, you see, introduced an idea perhaps that maybe there could be ways to allow in ways that don't displace current tenants, allow these buildings here to become fourplexes, which are currently single family homes. Currently, owners are allowed to build an ADU and a junior ADU and a main house, which is 3 units. So in some ways, maybe envisioning how to do that in a way that might maximize not just the opportunity for development, but really for nice habitable units that really contribute to the feeling of the neighborhood. So again, you can see the numbers over here. I won't go over all of them just for the sake of time, but we do get, we hope, a little bit more ability to perhaps have some centralized green space, perhaps that is publicly owned. Again, that would be working with the property owners and with the city to be able to make that publicly owned or at least publicly accessible. And that's that dark green color that's here. Design diversity looks at really kind of bringing on a lot more parcels into development potential. And so you can see, similarly, we have Portage Avenue here. This proposal, this draft does envision that perhaps the Fry's building is demolished, and that if that building were demolished and replaced with housing, but also some office component, that is a bit more than the office component that's currently there, but part of the trade-off being perhaps then we're able to get some of the housing built there. Similarly, the Cloudera building is imagined to still have some office. It has a little bit more office than currently is there at site right now, but again, getting more housing, getting some public parkland. So really trying to think about what kind of trade-offs might make it beneficial, advisable, or desirable for landowners to turn office uses and office rents into housing and undertake that work. One thing I will say also about all of these options that you'll see, kind of, I'll just go back and forth, is that you could, have this option happen maybe in the next 10 years. And then if this option were to become realized, you really haven't lost anything. You haven't created any streets or any pedestrian pathways that you have to, break up or go back on, but really one plan could build upon the other into the future. You can see we've tried to put townhomes near the single family area, or maybe this becomes small college clusters or smaller kind of denser units, but still kind of in a single family home, like low scale style. And so we want to have those lined with the townhomes, but then larger buildings facing El Camino Real, which is a street of a greater scale. And so that scale perhaps is more appropriate for that large street. Okay, so I think I've been talking enough. So I wanted to point out just a few items that might be helpful for the commission to opine on, that we would love to hear on. There are many other items that are beyond this that I would love to have your feedback on, and Chitra will be taking furious notes. Thank you, Chitra. And these are some of the different trade-offs that we as a working group and as a community have to really think about and wrestle with and try to figure out where do we land. Some items include the number of housing units. So there is a desire among many in the working group, and I think we saw in a lot of our feedback from the survey, folks who really do want housing, and I think council heard that also this year, having housing being a top priority. So what is the right number of housing units? And then also, where should the location of different building types go? I just talked about Portage Avenue or Portage Street being kind of this center street, this main street. Is that where a lot of the density should go, or particularly higher height buildings? Because then it's kind of away from the single family areas. And so that height might not be as imposing if it's located elsewhere. Another way to think about it is putting more of the density and more of the housing units as close to Caltrain as possible, so that even though some folks may work in Cal Ave or in the research park, they may have partners or other folks living with them who catch the train to go to work. And so that might be a better location to have more of the high density buildings located. We also have talks about non-traditional types of housing like cottage clusters, live work units, artist lofts. If you have any opinions or experience with those, we'd love to hear what you think as well. When it comes to retail and office use, I think one of the big trade-offs we face is this desire to say, let's just build housing and zone everything for housing. And the perhaps, at least again, previous reality that office uses paid a significant rent and were pretty lucrative in Palo Alto. And so if someone has an office use that is paying its rent, and it is generating income, how to incentivize ending that office use to build housing. And so I think that's kind of a discussion that we keep having of, how much do we just say no, build housing via zoning, or other tools the city might have available, such as amortizing the uses, the retail uses over a period of time and having them cease, or trying to say, yes, you can build a little bit more office as long as you build housing. Is that trade-off worth it? Similarly with retail, I think that there is a desire to have a lot of retail, but there can be a connection between office users and workers in the daytime who then use that retail during the daytime. And so we want to be thoughtful to think about what's that mix between housing, office, and retail that can really create a strong ecosystem. For public space, there's a real desire for open space, and I think, you know, I'm totally supportive of. I think we have to pursue making sure that we have public parkland in this area. It's in the comprehensive plan. That's part of the goal. So we've looked at how to look at naturalizing the creek and making the creek more of an asset, even within the part of the creek that is not expanding it. But we can do some naturalization, some pathways, some walkways, some bikeways, which would be really great. But what's that balance between publicly owned space, but also privately owned but publicly accessible space? Is that something that we see has some good potential here in Palo Alto to make sure that as people are building these new apartment buildings, they're also building some space that's for the community to access as well. And lastly, circulation. There is pretty strong consensus to promote walking and biking and to really try to keep cars out of here. There's a little bit of a rub with that, not too great though, with the fact that people who live in new housing will likely have at least one car. We see this area, and currently already a lot of people have 2 cars in their household, even though a lot of people in the area as it is do walk or bike to work, which is great. But a lot of times for weekend trips or for things around town, because Palo Alto and the region is still pretty car centric, people are likely going to have at least one car in their household. So they need a place to park it, and they need a way to get from the main street to their parking space. And then also, if we're going to have retail, if it's going to survive just on those people who are within walking distance, then we need a lot of people within walking distance. Conversely, if we're going to draw from a larger area for people to walk and bike and get to the retail, we may also need to have some parking spaces. And so trying to balance, again, the idea of limiting cars, but also promoting a lot of cars or a lot of people coming to support that retail uses that are there. So those are a couple points. I'm going to leave those up on the screen. But do let me know, Chair Templeton, if you'd like me to take this down, and Vin can also put the Zoom to where people can see kind of a gallery view if that's something that is needed or desired.
Great, thank you so much for this presentation. Yeah, let's definitely leave that up for now. I will start to take questions from, and these are content related questions from the commissioners, if you have any for Ms. Tanner. And then we will go to public comment, and then we will entertain this discussion. So let's try and compartmentalize that a little bit to keep some order in this. So the first hand I see here is Vice Chair Rupavar.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Extremely helpful. So my question is, the 2017 federal grant that kicked off the NVCAP, were there any strings attached to that, or timelines or anything like that that would provide boundaries that we need to stay within? Or do we have the money? How does that work? Do we have the money now? And
yeah. Yes, and I'll queue up Chitra in case I forget any of the details, because she has been with this project since the inception of the grant, and I'm sure as part of actually the grant writing team. So in terms of time, we did get a so it's a grant from Caltrans, and it's a federal pass-through grant. So the money is coming from the federal government to Caltrans and then to us for essentially doing work in transit-oriented kind of planning work, which clearly this falls into that bucket. And so we need to fulfill the terms of the grant, which were to go through the area planning process. And so, for example, if we were, let's say, you know, there's lots of discussions about what needs to get cut in the budget or something like that. Fortunately, this is mostly grant funded. But if for some reason the city said, oh, we just don't want to do this project anymore, we would need to give any money that we have received through the reimbursement process back. And so we wouldn't be able to keep that. So that's one thing. We need to finish the project. We did get 1 2-year extension. And so I believe that we need to finish this up by 2022 December is our deadline to kind of go through with the adoption process and all of that. Chitra, are there any other big things that we have to do that I'm missing? If I don't hear anything, I'll assume that maybe it's a no, but we'll give Chitra a second to find her mute if there's anything else.
No, there's nothing else other than that.
Okay.
Just the timeline.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Rupavar, did you have any, Vice Chair Rupavar, did you have any other questions?
No.
Okay, great. Any other hands, commissioners? I appreciate the question that Vice Chair Rupavar just asked. I was also wondering about that, so thank you. And then do we need to seek any extensions on that related to the COVID crisis emergency?
Yeah, at this point in time, I don't foresee that. We did miss 2 meetings. We were supposed to meet in March and in April for the working group. But since we have, a good 2 years plus before we need to conclude, I think we should be okay.
Okay. And then I think this is a technical question, but if you want me to rephrase it for the next section, please let me know. But you mentioned in all of these that you're maintaining the streets as they are. Did you have any consideration of reclaiming some of the street area for housing?
Yeah, and what I meant by that is that in any of the proposals, so kind of as you go from proposal 1 to 3, you obviously have more density, and I didn't go over in detail, but we do have some new streets, and some of it is kind of making existing streets a little more formal. So for example, maybe connecting Ash through so that you could get from Ash over to, I believe it's Acacia. And so if we started at plan 1, let's say, and over time built up to 3, we wouldn't be, building housing where we then need to tear it down to build a street or something like that. I don't believe that we're necessarily reclaiming any of the streets for housing because some of the parcels are so big that in order to have some connectivity, we're kind of building a street possibly, or a pathway, pedestrian or car or bike pathway through that. So we didn't contemplate like vacating any streets, but the street network in the area is kind of broken up by some of those big land parcels.
Okay, I got it. So there's not really a discussion of a campus type effect for this. We're keeping the grid the way it is for now in the discussion.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. So if you look, so this is one, and so you can see like here, this is kind of actually a little street here that goes around the building, and then you can connect over here, but it's pretty narrow. And so then maybe we'd make sure that actually is a street that is connecting. And then there could be a street you could connect here and then connect actually over here to Olive. Sorry, I said Acacia, that's Olive. So that would be a new connection. And if if we built this version first, here's a house. Well, in the next version, the houses are still there and the street can be connected through.
Got it. All right. Thank you. This is a great presentation. Very helpful. Don't see any more hands from commissioners. Last call before we go to public comment. All right, so then can you please lead us through the public comment? I know we had several folks dialing in to comment.
Yes, so for this item, we have 6 public comments. First will be Rebecca Sanders, followed by Ken Joy, followed by Angela Della Porta, followed by Winter, and then Kelsey Baines. And then last but not least, we have Kirsten Flynn. If there's anyone else who wishes to speak on this item, please raise your hand now. First, we have Rebecca. Rebecca, I see you have 2 user accounts in this meeting, so I will unmute the first account first, and if that doesn't work, we'll try the second one. Okay. So let me go ahead and get the timer up, and then Rebecca, if you can go ahead and try to speak. Rebecca, are you there? I have unmuted you on my end, but you have to unmute from your computer as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, right on. Thank you. Let me just pull myself together here. Thank you. All right, are you starting my timer like right now? Is it my time?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, my name is Becky Saunders. I'm moderator of the Ventura Neighborhood Association. I do not speak for all Venturans, but I speak for the Ventura Neighborhood Association, who has been following this process closely. And we have discussions monthly and bi-monthly about the progress of NEVCAP. So I want to thank you, city staff, for this presentation and all your hard work. And thank you, commissioners, for convening and discussing. We Venturans have been watching with growing frustration the NEVCAP process. This is our neighborhood, and for us, NEVCAP was to be a really iterative, inclusive process where the working group would be empowered to take our feedback, brainstorm, understand existing conditions, and synthesize all those good ideas through the funnel and come up with some exciting options for us. But the reality is this: none of the proposals put forth by Perkins and Will really reflect the wishes of the people of Ventura and do not really reflect the will of the working group. The three proposals are not alternatives. They are gradations of the same plan: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. There's nothing that they did that really addresses or honors the space or even looks like it belongs in Ventura. So the working group has never had a chance to discuss the proposals which were presented tonight. They were never able to put forth their own design to the group for discussion. None of the proposals seem to be site specific. They're not really designed with current zoning or context or conditions in mind. Now, we Venturans have been waiting 25 years as it is for the Fry site to revert to housing. That's what we said back in the day. It's in the record. Fry's was supposed to wither away and then be replaced by housing. We really want housing there like other neighborhoods. Okay, and so I met with Jonathan Lay right before the quarantine, and I asked him if he couldn't slow down the train here to give the NEVCAP working group a chance to really dig into the process. And he did tell me that they needed to get the work done in order to meet the deadline. So I'm really excited about this 2-year extension. I hope that gives us a chance for course correction. But even if we had to give the money back, it's kind of fallacious. I mean, the bus is packed, the tires have air, the fuel, people are on the bus, but they weren't really sure which direction to take, and they don't really know where they're going. So I kind of felt like the NEVCAP process left and drove all over the place and was kind of wandering through the wilderness. Okay, so everyone always freaks out when you say eminent domain. So if we don't want to use that tool, which by the way, has been used in Palo Alto to create the Opportunity Center, for example, what tools do we have? Well, how about a moratorium for additional development in the planned area until we can figure out what we're going to do? Zoning, let's get rid of that commercial use that allows the owners to reap these enormous rental benefits. And so I just think that the goal slide that Rachel showed, which was lovely, about the NEVCAP visions, said nothing about office and kept the focus on the community serving retail. So we don't want office, we want housing. And so we really, really hope that you will take it to heart to use the NEVCAP area to help solve our housing problem and housing for everyone at all price ranges. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So we just have another member of the public who just raised their hand, L. David Barron. David, you will be our last speaker after Kirsten. Up next, we have Ken. Okay, Ken, if you can just unmute your microphone, you may speak. Ken, are you there?
I'm having trouble unmuting.
Okay, we can hear you now. Speak.
Okay, this is Ken Joy. I've lived in the Ventura neighborhood since 1992. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. Joe Simidian, when addressing the Stanford GUP, used the phrase full mitigation. When considering this staff report, please ask yourself whether the impact of the proposed alternatives upon the Ventura neighborhood could be fully mitigated. That is, what would be required to mitigate the impact of proposed development upon our neighborhood? Furthermore, please consider whether other adjoining neighborhoods are absorbing any of the impact of development and traffic in our community. Certainly, Palo Alto needs to add housing to attack the jobs housing ratio, but at what cost? Regarding the staff report you've been given tonight, please ask staff why it states 3 draft plan alternatives have been created when only alternative 3, page 32 of 54, actually covers the entire study area. Seemingly, only one full alternative actually has been created, as Becky just noted. Lastly, I would suggest to you that it is inappropriate to make policy decisions based upon whether a project pencils out for a commercial developer. Rather, we should zone for what we want as a community and not allow commercial developers to build something which is non-conforming. Also, we should not allow a property owner to lease a building for a use which does not meet the zoning or which is different from the existing legal non-conforming use at the time the zoning was established. If 340 Portage Avenue was allowed to have retail use at the time it was zoned RM30, that should be strictly enforced. We don't need more office space to fill up where Fry's retail was. Thank you, and thank you for your work on this effort.
Thank you, Ken. So, our next speaker is Angela Della Porta. Angela, if you can unmute your microphone from your computer, you may speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yes, my name's Angela Della Porta, and I'm a member of the working group. And first, I want to thank all of the working group members for all of their hard work, all of my neighbors in Ventura for their attention to this project. And also, I want to thank Rachel and Chitra for providing so much information and help as we move forward or try to move forward with this process. I want to make sure that the commissioners know that the three alternatives that Rachel presented are not the only alternatives. The working group members have come up with some working group members have come up with 5 different alternatives to the alternatives that are guided by the vision that Rachel shared with you. And we will be discussing those at our next meeting. And I think that they do address a lot of the concerns that many people have had on the working group and in the neighborhood, though we'll have to see. But I think they do address a lot of the concerns and are guided by that vision, as I said. I do want to add also that many of us are concerned about new construction that is just springing up in the NVCAP area before we have had a chance to say anything about what we recommend. And we do think, many of us think, that it would be important not to allow new construction when we have not had a chance to decide what we as a city, as a neighborhood and as a city, what we really want to see there. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Our next speaker is Winter. Winter, I have unmuted your microphone. If you can please unmute your microphone from your end, you may speak.
Yes, as to these 3 so-called plans, you know, there are no parking studies. They're not based on any zoning codes that we have. They don't conform to our development standards. They basically disregard our parkland dedication requirements. They're in no way reality-based. Therefore, there's no really way that they can be compared. So the result are that we're presented with are false choices, and they were presented to us in a very biased, poorly designed survey. And now they're presented to you, planning commissioners, and to the public tonight. And I really find this disturbing. You know, if Plan 3 were built out, do you realize, and I wonder if people on the NVCAP it was ever explained to them that it would be 18 times denser than anything else in Palo Alto. Plan 3, 18 times denser than anything else in Palo Alto, with all the implications that that brings in terms of overflow parking, traffic, everything, and the consequences for the Ventura neighborhood. The first plan includes no additional parks. The second, only 1.1 acres of open space, and the third 2.7 acres. And open space includes plazas, even some setbacks, narrow strips. For comparison, Heritage Park downtown is 2.01 acres of grass, trees, and children's play acres, actually a usable park. Under the parkland dedication, I want to read you the relevant part. Think of Plan 3. The amount of land required is 531 square feet per single family home and 366 square feet per multifamily unit. The multifamily rate typically applies to anything other than single family detached units. Do you realize how the amount of park required in this town, and how both all of these alternatives do not meet up to the amount of parkland? In addition to, Bull Park is a very small park, and the Ventura neighborhood is the most underserved, has the lowest income, and is most diverse. And I think this very poorly serves the good people of the Ventura neighborhood and takes advantage of them. And I think that it is borders on economic racism. And I think that this town should be I think not this town, but I think you need to rethink this seriously. That's what I think about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Winter. We have another member of the public who just raised their hand, Mark. Mark, you will be our last speaker after L. David Barron. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Kelsey Baines. Okay, Kelsey, if you can please unmute your microphone and then you can speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So hi, planning commissioners and staff. Thank you very much for your service during this difficult time. So I would just like to say that I am really excited about the opportunity for this location. It's one of the few large sites in Palo Alto, and we really have the opportunity to create a great neighborhood that is walkable and serves the needs of our community. And I know that one of the biggest needs that has been expressed has been our dire need for housing at all income levels. And that came across in the survey data. It has been expressed many times. And I think we have the opportunity to, over the course of time, add a lot of housing and serve a lot of residents and future residents at this parcel. And one thing I wanted to note is that if we care about affordable housing, if we want to prioritize it, that is going to require density. The way that you get a lot of affordable housing is with density. I'll share that last night I was advocating for a project in San Mateo. It is 225 new affordable homes. And that was made possible because it was a 7-story building and they did the parking offsite. It's a beautiful building. And I wish we were looking at this site at doing some district parking rather than doing all underground parking, which is much more expensive. And I think makes buildings look a lot uglier. So I wish we were doing some looking at like shared parking structures without doing the underground parking. The other point I wanted to make is just about the survey results, which I was excited to see that the survey results suggested that people prioritize housing and that people were open to the low rise 4- and 5-story buildings. And even though the mid-rise buildings were more controversial, I will note that still a majority of respondents supported those buildings. And I do think there was a pretty skewed sample in that only 20% of survey respondents were renters, despite renters making up a majority of the Ventura neighborhood. So in the future, I would like to potentially see more outreach to renters, as renters really stand to be the beneficiaries of this plan if it's done well. So thank you again, and that's all. Bye.
Thank you, Kelsey. Okay, our next speaker will be Kirsten. Okay, Kirsten, if you can go, please unmute your microphone.
Okay. So I want to thank staff for the presentation and the commissioners for meeting on this topic. I am Kirsten Flynn and I'm a member of the NVCAP. And we are a committed group of citizens who love our city and our region and are very much willing to work hard to hash out a creative solution. We've given countless hours to this process and it has not been an ideal process. And now, of course, we're faced with working through this global health crisis. So first of all, I want to express that I'm eager for this to be a robust process where we really delve in deep and dissect these plans and the plans that our working group has come up with. And I think for that to happen, I strongly support a permit freeze for new projects in this area. We have gotten to the point where we know a great deal of what interests and concerns people about this project area. And I thought I'd sort of share with you what I see as the key themes. First of all, inclusive and affordable housing, even though not everyone has made peace with density. So that is just, I guess you could call that an opportunity to communicate that. Secondly, the bike boulevard along Park, especially in the traffic conflict area around Park and Page Mill, is very much an area of concern, and improving the east-west connections to our already robust north-south bicycle routes. Very important to the community, comes up consistently as one of the most important things in this region. Thirdly, traffic in that El Camino and Page Mill, I don't need to tell you, is a broken intersection. It's the worst in the city and one of the worst along El Camino. And it constantly causes cut through traffic in the neighborhood. And this is a great concern to all of the people we have heard from, both from the quality of the street life and from the safety of the bike boulevard. Therefore, one of the options has the parking structure very close to Bike Boulevard, which I think as the more crossings you add to the Bike Boulevard of car in egress and outgo, the more you're asking for the quality of the Bike Boulevard to be decreased. So I just thought I'd share what I was hearing from working group members and from the public as you look at this plan.
Okay, thank you, Kirsten. Our next speaker is L. David Barron. David, can you please unmute your microphone and you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. So good evening, Commission. I think there are a number of things I've said at public comment at various times before that are worth repeating very briefly. We have a crisis level housing shortage in the Bay Area, and you can see this in the prices of housing and the people who are being pushed out of the area. I'm a big supporter of having dense housing near transit. That's good for the environment, and it's something that many people want. Given those things, I think I would encourage supporting one of the plans, supporting the end of this spectrum that has more housing density. I don't have an opinion on whether it needs to look like alternative 3, but I think something with that density or potentially even more is the kind of thing that the city should be looking at. If the city has a target in its next RHNA cycle of 10 to 15,000 units, which I think is something that's plausible, the city's going to miss that target by a lot if one of the largest developable parcels is underdeveloped. I think, so I live on the other side of the city in University South. and I think my own neighborhood has significant underzoning. And a bunch of that zoning was redone in a comprehensive plan about 20 years ago for the south of Forest area. And a number of those areas that were rezoned, many of the parcels didn't end up being redeveloped. And when we do see development proposals in, say, the RT35 zone, I remember one a few years ago, they look very small, and we wonder why people are building these small things in a place that we feel today should have bigger things. So I would just both encourage looking at the plans here that have more housing density, and also remember that if the zoning that you end up with isn't enough for developers to want to build the thing, the parcels are going to remain the way they are today. And you don't necessarily end up with a vision just because you zone for it, unless that vision is appealing enough for people to want to build it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our last speaker for this item is Mark. Mark, can you please unmute your microphone, and then you will have 3 minutes to speak. Mark, are you there?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool, let's go. Oh, hi there, I'm Mark. I'm a renter, live on Seal Avenue. I would just like to say, this is a point I made before, but I'd like to restate it. I think it's essential, both in the survey results and also other comments, to look at conflicts of interest. I think homeowners in the area, they both are insulated from any unaffordability issues. In fact, they benefit. They're investors in real estate, and any scarcity in housing actually redounds their economic benefit. I think due to conflict of interest, all of their input here should be disregarded. The point was made earlier, density would be 18 times higher here than other areas of Palo Alto. This would be true. It is a reflection of the underzoned capacity of the rest of Palo Alto. That really should be revisited, especially in the light of both what outcomes we need to guarantee. You could look at the external factor of RENA capacity that Palo Alto will have to do. One of the leading RENA allocation measures is looking at job opportunity and so on. Palo Alto is going to have to increase a huge amount. But I'd say RENA is the floor it would look at. The goal should be, what are the aims in affordable housing we want to create? When you have single family housing units that are selling for $3 million, this is not serving the greater good. It is a broken system. And I think people who are pointing to process to say this is the way zoning has been done and should continue, I think we have to really look at what are the outcomes we want. And I think preserving low density zoning in the face of $3 million ranch homes is just absurd. And I think people who just point to process, that's a ridiculous way to look at it. I'd say one valid point is looking at the problem if we actually, of parking. I think this has to be joined with measures of restricting the anarchy of free street parking throughout the city, especially any place that would possibly be within walking distance of this development. I think we need a comprehensive, allocation of parking spots to make sure that if we have underparked units in this area, that we actually need to make sure that they aren't just, taking up street parking. This is a very scarce resource we need to use right. So I am very happy that it's improved density. I think it should be much denser, but it's a start. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Chair Templeton, that concludes the public comments for this item.
Thank you all very much for hanging in there and providing us with your thoughts on these plans. I'm going to first go to the PTC representative to the NVCAP to hear her thoughts. And I encourage the other commissioners to please raise your hands as well if you wish to when you're ready to participate in the discussion. Vin or Rachel, would you mind putting up your slide with discussion guidance? All right, Commissioner Suma, thank you. You're muted.
Thank you very much. So I don't think I need to, so yes, I was the PTC rep, I'm the PTC rep to the working group. I've been there every single meeting. I don't think we need to go back over the process. I think staff covered things very well, but I have to say, when I wasn't aware this was going to be on our agenda. I thought we were actually based on a conversation I had with staff, that we were going to be looking at parking issues downtown. So I was really surprised to see this on the agenda and a little confused because the working group has not, I think a member of the public said this, but the working group has not had an opportunity to go over these alternatives. And they were presented at our last meeting, and the meeting went so late that we actually went just 10 minutes over. So the 7 working group members that were there could make one initial, like 1 minute or 2 minute response. And there were only half of the working group members at this meeting. Then there was a community meeting, and obviously the schedule has been challenged because of the global pandemic. So I don't think this is ready for the Planning Commission to discuss yet. And the main reason is because the working group and staff haven't had an opportunity to dig into the details. And I don't see how anybody could evaluate and compare these 3 plans, as we don't have any of the impacts, traffic impacts, parking impacts, traffic studies. We don't have development standards and zones. We don't have a way to compare the 3 alternatives because we don't have all the information yet. I mean, I agree with staff on packet page 15, especially. They talk about the sort of the give and take that has to go here, and that that it's going to be challenging, but working together, we'll figure it out. And I just think this needs a lot more work by staff in the working group before we can have a very valuable discussion about it. So sorry to throw that wrench in the works, but I do feel I'd like my colleagues' feedback, but I just don't think there's enough here for us to evaluate and compare these. And I find the 3 alternatives, well, let me leave it at that and let me see what you guys think, because I'd rather this was further along for us to understand what the impacts are of preferring the alternatives and comparing them.
Thank you, Commissioner Suma. The next hand I see up is Vice Chair Rupavar.
Okay, I think I have a lot to say. I think there needs to be a lot of flexibility built into anything that's adopted or the alternatives, and we need to be very future looking given COVID-19 and the impact that it's had. We're talking about a global pandemic. We're looking at 26 million people unemployed, 4.6% contraction in the economy. I think we need to think about, how quickly can all that unemployment be reabsorbed? What kind of economic ramifications is it going to have? And by extension, what does that mean for planning and real estate? What are our cities going to look like? We need to be very future thinking and forward thinking. This is a great opportunity to build housing in a unique opportunity. We don't want to, fritter it away. I know that we've, already invested a lot of time, but I would agree. I think we need to wait to see what happens when we get on the other side of COVID to really be able to evaluate what we want this space to look like. I think when you look at expert analysis from McKinsey, BCG. I've been following them. The one thing that everyone is saying is there's so much uncertainty and volatility right now. We do not know what, what's going to be like. We just don't know like what the world is going to look like. We know it's going to be different. We just don't know how. So there are, a few things that I wanted to touch on. Well, first of all, I do think that this needs to be a collaborative process between the landowners and the homeowners and the residents. I don't think it behooves anyone to start talking about, litigation or we're going to force it or something like that. Because like, I think one of the members of the public said, the landowners can just leave their property as it is. And I don't think that benefits anyone. So therefore, I think it really does need to be a collaborative process. But a few things that I wanted to point out economically that could impact what this area would look like. The first being work from home. A lot of tech companies are moving to working from home and working remotely. I think that's going to impact the demand for office space. And, we might be looking at a situation where office rents aren't as lucrative. And we might be looking at a situation where we need fewer cars because people aren't commuting to work. And what kind of impact is that going to have on traffic? The trend was working from home. And I think that the pandemic has now accelerated that. So that's one thing. Another thing that I wanted to highlight is e-commerce. E-commerce is decimating retail right now. If you look at, I think Neiman Marcus is talking about filing for bankruptcy. Gap is having problems. I mean, retail is struggling. So when we are looking at this space and we're talking about, okay, we're going to put all this retail in, let's be very sensitive and think through things clearly. Like, are there going to be retail tenants to tenant this space? That's another issue. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying this is something that we need to really think through and make sure that if we're putting these things in, there are going to be people that are going to them. Another thing, I think a theater was mentioned. If you have been following the news, the theaters are getting decimated. Universal and AMC theaters are currently in a dispute because given the prevalence of online streaming, Universal has released their Trolls World Tour movie on streaming at the same time that it was supposed to go into theaters and is now rethinking its distribution channels. And there's a lot of economic pressure on theaters. And the question is this going to destroy the entire theater experience and concept? Because everyone's moving to online streaming now. And the other issue I want to raise is we have a very, very, everybody knows there's significant unemployment right now. What is that? We have mortgage deferrals for now until July that have been mandated. But once July hits and all these people are still unemployed, are we going to see defaults on homes and on credit cards? And what is that going to mean in terms of the mix? Do we want more rental or do we want more ownership, or what type of mix do we want in this area for it to still work, 10, 20, 30 years down the road? A few other things will tie into that. Brokerage activities are down significantly. People aren't buying and selling homes. Is that going to immediately pick up after COVID-19, or people are going to be more conservative and want to rent for a longer period of time? Something else to think about. And then finally, a lot of companies are actually thinking about moving away from open space, doing touchless tech, antimicrobial fabrics. What impact is that going to have on tenant improvement allowances? And again, the construction costs that go into building these spaces. So those are just a few things that I want us to hopefully think about. I do agree with Commissioner Suma that for me, at least, it's premature to think about this. But for me, the reasoning is I kind of want to wait for this COVID-19 stuff to shake out and a little bit more data and analysis from planning. Once they have more insight, I understand right now we just don't have visibility, but I just want to make sure that, we are very future thinking, and we don't just do something because now we're in the process, but we do the right thing that's best for this city in the long term.
Thank you, Vice Chair Rupavar. I see Commissioner Lowing followed by Commissioner Olczak. Commissioner Lowing?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah, first I want to really thank the public speakers who were very specific, and they're obviously very attuned to this, and they, like all of us, want to get it right. So, comments that we need full mitigation, that there's frustration there. None of the three alternatives is at all right, and we aren't listening as a city, et cetera. I think, certainly that has to be considered, and other alternatives are coming out right now. And then our own participant in the working group I really respect the summary that she put out there. My own thought as I went through this was actually pretty close to identical, which is this is a good start, and the working group is working it. They have been for 2 years, so they're the experts at this point. I think it's too early to be discussing this with planning because we're not being asked for anything about zoning. There's no project, so we're not being asked about traffic flow or whatever. We all are in favor of, not to mention must do, substantive housing. So that is packed into any of these proposals, which is absolutely great. But it just seems a little bit early. And I think that the other thing that's of concern is that I guess Commissioner Suman mentioned this, but I'm not sure how the objective tonight was to sort of provide input. And I don't know how we can provide input on these alternatives or any without any look at the outcomes, any calculations of that. One, just because I was able to do the math pretty quickly, if we just picked alternative number 2, for example, that would about triple the current households there. And using the current car ownership, which I just rounded off to summer 1 and summer 2, so it's 1.5, that's a minimum of about another 1,050 cars. That could be fine, but I don't know, because we don't have anything in here that says where they're going to go, how it can be mitigated. So for us to opine on this in a way that might, begin to create a recommendation to council, I don't think there's enough here to be making those calls. And some of these things are so aspirational, which is great at this stage, that in spite of the fact that the staff report says that there are barriers to pedestrians and bicyclists because of the actual landscape there, one of the main things that comes out is that we need to minimize vehicular traffic. And in my example here, we're already adding 1,000 cars. So again, I don't go into this with any preconceived notions. I'm just saying we don't know how to do the calculations on what we're really getting here with the data that we have right now. I would also caution us to do more surveys over the course of how much time this takes, because right now you have 70 people who live in Palo Alto opining, and that's again a good start. That's valuable, but we shouldn't be making decisions for the next 100 years that are based on that. So that's kind of another detail that we just don't have enough to be at our level at this stage making that kind of call. So I would suggest that we return this to the working group and take feedback from them and staff as to when we would have more sort of, I hate to use the word data, but more of a proposal here around these alternatives, but also listen to others that are going to be brought up by the neighbors, because they're obviously working on it. Some of the things that are embedded in here, I think absolutely at this point, almost, mom and apple pie. Yes, we absolutely have to have housing in this project. We got to figure out how much. Yeah, it's got to be mixed use. Open space needs to be real, not just, a patio in an office. Displacements of current residents should be 0 if at all possible. Eminent domain should be off the table. when we go with definitions of being self-parked, let's make sure we know what we're talking about there, and so on. So there's a lot of stuff that's baked in here that needs to be here. But relative to us addressing this tonight in any sort of substantive way, I just don't think we're ready yet. So again, I thank the public for their input to sort of help crystallize this for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowing.
Chair Templeton, if I may respond to something that Commissioner Lowing said, is that
Of
okay?
course, yeah.
I just wanted to thank Commissioner Lowing for your comments, and I think these comments are actually exactly what we're looking for tonight. We aren't coming to you with a study, and unfortunately, due to the way the project is going to have to go with our constraints of time and budget, we're not going to be able to study these. We're not going to be able to afford traffic studies for 3 alternatives. So what we need to do is work with the working group to refine these down to maybe 1 or 2, get council to kind of give us direction on what direction are they wanting to go with some of these things. And then we'll be able to study, 1 alternative that we're maybe with some variance in there, but that's really where we're headed towards. And so things that you've said that to me are really helpful, saying that in your opinion, eminent domain is off the table, displacement is a thing. Even your comments on open space, maybe you have more about what is sufficient open space. Yeah, a patio and balcony is nice, but we really need, X or Y or, things like that. So to me, that is helpful. It may seem, like, oh, it's already known, but I think for myself, for the working group, it's helpful to know where the commissioners are at, or the things that you're curious about knowing, so that when we do come back, as we're working and when we come back, we are more knowledgeable. And also just hopefully a chance to provide the commissioners with just more insight into the process, so that when we come back for a recommendation, that's not the first time that you are hearing about what's been going on in the work of the group. So I thank you for your comments, and I think they're very helpful to me.
Okay. Yeah, I would just add that this probably echoes the public as well, but we don't want to just get it done. We want to get it right. And we don't know how long the COVID is going to delay this process, or if this moves to one of those things that council talked about the other night as being a mothball item. We don't know that yet, as Commissioner Rupavar said. But we got to get it right, because it's a really big deal. It's an important deal, and it could be, as you guys are working on it, a wonderful, beautiful neighborhood that houses a lot more people. But let's work it. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Ms. Tanner, for chiming in on that. I do think we are having a very useful discussion right now, so it is much appreciated that you brought this to us to give this early feedback. I would also say that I would encourage all the commissioners to attend the NVCAP meetings. The open house we had in February was fascinating and really informative, and a great place to get a feel and a sense for the community and have direct opportunity to talk with members of the neighborhood. And so I would just plug attending those, and now that they may be virtual, and the next, who knows if the next ones will be virtual, might be even easier to attend. Okay, so next we will hear from Commissioner Alczek, followed by Commissioner Hechtman. Commissioner Alczek.
Thank you, Chair Templeton. If it's okay, I'd like to ask staff a few questions. So I'm assuming that's okay with you, Chair Templeton, if
Go
they
ahead.
respond during my. Okay, so are there written or stated objectives for the working group?
So the goals that we have, I did share those city council goals. They do have longer kind of paragraph level descriptions of what those goals are. So it isn't just, housing. It has some descriptors of what those objectives are.
I mean, did the working group have the objective to make a single recommendation or to conclude, or was there some sort of stated objective that 51% of the, what was there? I guess what I'm asking you is, was there criteria laid out that would allow us to say they're done?
Maybe I'll ask Chief if she has any input in this, but as I, again, coming to the project partway through, looking backwards at the documentation that was laid out, I see that there was a desire and a goal to say we want to get to the one kind of consensus alternative. I think there's also room in the process to recognize that that may not happen. And so, you know, in previous area planning processes in the cities, there have been recommendations from the working group, from staff, and different bodies have had divergent ones. And so I think there's a recognition that we would like to get to consensus, but that we may not reach that full consensus around one alternative. But that's the goal. That's
Okay.
the dream, the aspiration.
And would you shed a little light on how the members were selected?
I actually am not sure. I know they were appointed by the city council. Chitra, do you know the process by which members put forward their names to be considered?
Yes, there was a selection criteria. There were like members of the like residents and property owners, and then people who does business over there or owns businesses. So there were a list of criteria which we had, and you know, I think there was a big pool from which the council had to select from. So
Okay, so stakeholders.
mhm.
So look, I think that my understanding of this group and the objectives reflect a sort of abstract hope that a group of individuals who have stake in the area, among others, could come together to help illuminate what they as a group had consensus on. And I think whenever you involve sort of often people with, you know, shared interests in an area, but divergent or diverse goals, you know, then it's almost like a negotiation, right? And I think that the benefit of the working group is that the conversations they have allow decision makers in our community to, you know, visibly see the articulation of the sort of range of opinions. I don't know necessarily that I would refer to the working group as the experts on what should be the sort of final notion of what should take place there. And the reason why is because unfortunately, the residents or the commercial property owners, their individual interests may not reflect the needs of the city as a whole, the way that the city wants to respond to its own, you know, long-term goals, whatever they are, the way the city wants to respond to the state requirements. So I'm a little hesitant to accept this idea that it needs to go back there as if this is the drafting of a comprehensive plan and there's a committee that's been tasked with developing it and they haven't had a chance to sort of review and make final edits. I don't think that the working group will realistically come to some conclusion that will represent necessarily the best way forward. I think that their discussions and their perspectives help inform decision makers on where there are serious sensitivities. But I am reluctant to describe them as the experts in the room and that they should be deferred to. And that's not intended to be insensitive to the commitment or the time that's been, you know, volunteered. But it is to say that I don't have the same confidence that that process will bring us to the conclusion that we need to get to. I really appreciate the comments that Commissioner Rupavar said. I think that it's clear that this particular moment in time has injected so much uncertainty on so many levels that there's a real it paralyzes decision makers to some extent from moving forward. I'll take the alternate view that I don't think it's unreasonable to create a blueprint for development in this area during this moment of uncertainty. The factors that are at play with respect to housing in California have not changed. And our reluctance to explore height limits and densities is not what our discomfort in this community with, pushing the boundary on those things 6 months ago and today are not different because of the COVID crisis. We need to begin the process of designing. I will, I had another question for staff, which was, maybe I wasn't quite paying attention and catching this, and I may have missed it, and I apologize if that's the case, but do one of the alternatives reflect what an SB 35 development would look like? And I ask that question because we're not operating in a vacuum, and there are alternatives to development that supersede what our local rules are, like SB 35, for example. And I was curious to know how maybe the working group or even the alternatives that staff put forward today relate to those.
Yeah, that's a fair question, considering even though SB 35 did not, SB 35. So what that was just a future of casting, that will be the subject of our next PTC meeting, will be SB 35 and objective standards and streamlining that have come out of that law, and that is with us as a city. And it could impact more and more parcels as we do or do not meet our affordability requirements in terms of housing construction. So we will talk more about that next time. SB 35 specifically adhering to that or kind of accommodating that requirements were not conceived of in this this plan, although to some degree with SB 35, the goal being to increase and streamline housing and permit more dense housing. That is kind of in the background, but I don't know that it specifically responds to it. If you think about something like the SB 50, which did not go through there, that was also not really a part of the design here, but certainly we are aware of the increasing rules from the state legislature that are pushing for more housing, more dense housing, and more housing located near transit. So that's maybe not a direct answer to your question, but it's certainly kind of in the ether of what we're trying to do as a department.
I'll say this, my reluctance to continue to invest staff resources in the stakeholder group, or excuse me, the working groups work, and my reluctance to invest more time and resources is not because of COVID. It's because I am just assuming that the state will figure this out before our local Palo Alto group does. That based on the sort of speed at which we operate, we're more likely to have the states create a option that may not adequately reflect, basically the Cupertino-Valco situation, right? Where the state made it so that there was just an unfair, I don't know if I should say unfair, an uneven leverage, between the developer and the city council and then the community at large. And well, look, I'll say this. I think that as far as alternatives go, I think that the alternative that explores the greatest density should be the one we focus on the most. We should be working through that option and understanding what are the elements of that break the camel's back in our community. To what extent that alternative has trigger points that seem insurmountable, and then we can dial it back. I think that there's a lot of creative ideas that you put forward today, and I think that I think it's difficult to make decisions and to sort of appreciate community sentiment in this format on a Zoom call and in Zoom city council meetings. And that to me is problematic. But I would encourage the commission to not shy away from the opportunity to continue reviewing this and to say, like, look, this is the largest opportunity in our city right now. That's regardless of the fact that the property owners may not have the wherewithal to develop anything for the next decade in that space if the downturn is as bad as it could be. But I think we could still say, but if you do develop, this is what we in the city want to encourage. And if you do this, you get this. And if I think everyone would probably agree that the current guidelines are not sufficient to meet the goals of the city. So why not take the opportunity to improve them? Even if you put a sunset on it, even if you said, okay, well, let's, until such time as we can do this, what are the pieces that we're willing to agree on now? I think I say this too often, perfect is the enemy of good. So I don't think we should shy away from this. I'm not sure how to resurrect I don't know how to put us back on track in terms of having this discussion move forward on a commission level. But I would largely not support the idea of returning it to a working group, because I don't think that they're likely to get through any progress in this COVID situation if we're not able to as a commission. And so, and frankly, I'm not, I don't want to take too much time, but and frankly, the last thing I want to say is I'm not sure what the objective is for them. I don't think that we expect them to come with us and say, this is what should go on the Fry's site. That's not likely to result in a development. Fry's isn't going to go, thank you, we'll do it. I think we need to create the zoning guidelines and the blueprint, and which should be based on the preferences we're already aware of and the goals that we have, and then say, we'll see what happens and hope for the best. And when I say hope for the best, I mean hope that there are stakeholders who have the desire and funds to invest. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Alchek. And it is Commissioner Hechtman. And Doria, Commissioner Suma, I see your hand up. I'd love to have a chance to give some comments first. So it'll go Commissioner Hechtman, myself, and then Commissioner Suma. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Templeton. Could I ask Rachel to put up the slide that had the schedule? And while she's doing that, I want to start by acknowledging the working group. That kind of commission work is largely thankless unless somebody takes the time to thank you, and I'm sure people do, but I want to be one of those people that says thank you for taking your time without the glamour of sitting in the council chamber like planning commissioners normally get to do when we're not sheltering in place. But I do think it's an important work, and I think that it's an augmentation of what we can do as planning commissioners, and so I'm really appreciative of that work. Also, and I want to really start by talking about process. I do understand that these three alternatives that have been presented to us tonight were presented to the working group, but in a context through really no fault other than COVID perhaps, where the working group really hasn't had an opportunity to deliberate these three alternatives. And I think that that's really important after the 2 years of discussing what might be, for them to be able to take a look at these three alternatives, discuss them amongst themselves, and through that evolve what they like and don't like. And I understand there are either 4 or 5 plans that working group members have come up with, alternative plans, and we haven't even seen those. And I, for one, would be curious to know what people who've spent 2 years working on these issues have in mind. And so when I look at the calendar, thank you for putting it up, Rachel, I see that the plan is to go from here back to the working group. And as I understood it, as Commissioner Lowing said, part of what we're supposed to do here is provide some input, I think, for the working group to take into account as it goes further with its work. And so I want to eventually do that, but I do, and I'm not really understanding the flow here. To me, this looks like we're here tonight. This is going to go to the working group, and from the working group, maybe it's going to city council. Is that the intention, Rachel?
Yes, the intention would be that we're in the refining phase. So we're trying to get down to, from, I think at this point, we maybe have 10 different versions of alternatives out there, down to 1 or 2 that we could get further council direction on, so that as we go forward again, when we want to spend our resources on studying that alternative, we know that that's something that this is where the city wants to put its resources for the studies.
Okay, thank you. So that being the case, I do think, and this echoes to some extent what Commissioner Suma was saying, that and other commissioners actually, that I think this should go back to the working group on May 26th or thereabouts, and when they have coalesced their ideas about the 3 alternatives that were produced and their 5 alternatives, I'd actually like it to come back to us, because I think that I've never even seen their 5 alternatives, and I'd like to have their best thinking come back to us, and then we can talk about that iteration, and whether it goes from there back to the working group and then to council, or straight to council, which would of course be more traditional to go from the PTC up to council. I'm open on that. But I would really like to see that process, and I think council would appreciate it too, because at this point, if it doesn't come back to us, council won't get any input from PTC on any of these 5 items, these 5 alternatives, and for all we know, one of those 5 alternatives could be the one that is forwarded by the working group. So I do want to echo what Rachel said in terms of the long-term process. My impression is that we're really in the concept plan part of this process, and that it is premature to have impact studies. And I was envisioning that the way this would play out is through this iterative process. Eventually, we would take something to the council with recommendations. They would pick a preferred plan, and that would be the study of, I'm sure, an EIR, and perhaps the second and third preferred plan would be the project alternatives that are studied in that EIR as iterations. And so I think we're a long way from that point. So those are my process comments. Substantively, I do want to give the working group and ultimately the council my thoughts on the 3 alternatives that were presented to us in the staff report. So first of all, the alternative number 1, which was the most limited growth version, I think that to me that's a non-starter. It's too little of everything. I think that, and I think that it's pretty clear that Palo Alto is going to have to must become more dense in its housing, not over the entire city, but in opportunity areas where we can become more dense. And this is I think this area is a fantastic opportunity for us to be looking at those things. And then when we look at alternatives 2 and 3, which are the medium and most dense versions, there are a couple of things that strike me. One is, as Vice Chair Rupavar mentioned, this is a 20, 30-year plan perhaps, and I think our city is going to evolve over that time to become more accepting and embracing and tolerant of density, but we're not there today. So I think it may be frightening for Palo Alto citizens to approve a plan next year calling for 8-story buildings. in the short term. And so I think that the plan that we come up with really needs to phase over time and increase of density. And we just start with 5-story buildings in the short term, because those I think are recognizable and fit within our overall scheme, but have milestones in this plan as to when we will up the density, up the height. And again, everything is not going to be built, no matter what plan we do, everything's not going to be built in 5 years or 10 years. There's going to be plenty of open areas here to do this. And I've got the same concern about parking. All 3 alternatives said 1 space per unit. I'm worried that developers aren't going to be able to get conventional loans for that today. I agree, and the evidence is pretty clear that we are moving in a direction of needing cars, personal owned cars, less and less, and I think we'll get there. But I think again, I think if we are going to approve something that could be done today, it has to be buildable today. And so I think we need to, in the parking area, start with something that is more realistic for presently, and then have milestones that would allow us to feather back parking to smaller numbers over time. And then the final input that I wanted to give was on the open space. My feeling is this area has to have a central park. That a couple acres, I don't know, but in the middle. I understand that the natural attraction of making the creek a usable open space, and I'm supportive of that, but maybe not as the main open space, because the people who live over by Page Mill in this development, that's a long way for them to go to get to their park. And so I would like to see some emphasis in having some central park, maybe taking some of the resources that we're going to expand and improve the creek, and instead devoting those more in the middle of the development area, so that everybody can use it, the residents and the office and the retail. It's available for everybody. So those are the thoughts I had, and I want to thank staff also for the long work that they have put in on getting this process to the point where it could be presented us tonight.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Heckman. I would like to make my comments, and then we'll go to Commissioner Suma. While you have this slide up, I would like to say I think it would be great for the PTC to see it again before it goes to City Council for longer range, finalizing plans. But I'm not quite sure if you need to see them sooner rather than later, just to check in. But I'm excited about the idea that we'll get to see it again here on the Planning Commission. So thank you for that. And then if you could go to your discussion slide, that would be helpful for me. In general, I made a list of likes and dislikes from what I read and heard during the presentation, and then responses to each of the alternatives. But one question I have to start off with is the page where we have the list of participants is just the appointees and doesn't say the staff. So aside from the planning department, what other departments are involved in the North Ventura, the MVCAP program?
That's a great question. And we have had involvement from the Office of Transportation. So Sylvia Starlack, who was with us earlier this evening, has been involved. You obviously know Chitra and myself, and then we have our consultant team. We've also worked a bit with our folks from the green green stormwater infrastructure plan, which you recently, I think late last year, saw, and just thinking about as redevelopment comes, how to incorporate green infrastructure into the plan. Also our utilities department, especially in terms of some of the planning regarding where utilities are currently located, which create some constraints for us. And also in regard to the creek restoration, our public works, again, with our stormwater folks and others, kind of thinking about what would the creek restoration look like, as well as some partners at other agencies helping us to think through what a creek restoration plan would look like. We've even had folks from the fire department opining on some of the ideas we've had, such as, closing a street to vehicular access and kind of what their standards would be regarding some of that. So we can really understand dimensionally how some of our ideas may or may not, again, under current standards, get buy-in from our fire department.
That's really cool. And, in addition to the Planning and Transportation Commission, we also have representatives from Architectural Review and Parks. So it's really nice to see that this discussion and this working group has included so many different points of view from stakeholders, as Commissioner Alchuk mentioned. I think that's really made the discussion very rich.
You actually made me think of something else who I forgot, and I'm sorry. Peter Jensen, Parks and Recreation. We did, and he's in Public Works, but with the expansion of the park there, Bulwer Park, we did a joint, the workshop, he had a table there to try to make sure we can maximize people coming to one workshop.
That's awesome. I don't know if your video is lagging or if it's my video. If it's mine, I apologize. Okay, so just wanted to say thank you for making sure that people are involved from all aspects and really getting creative on this. So my initial thoughts, I liked the compare and contrast about the different densities in terms of the alternatives. I was very intrigued by the idea of first floor retail. I like to see the BMR housing included. I would love to see more of that. I like the slide that had the community metrics with the line and then the target circles, like we have enough of the jobs and enough of the retail, but not enough of the housing. It was really nice to see those in lined up together to see where we lack. I also liked your idea about progressing from alternatives, one of the alternatives to another alternative over time, and that there's ways to build this and you don't have to do it all at once. I think that addresses some of the concerns about culture shock or whatever we want to call it that Commissioner Heckman brought up. I am concerned about the infeasibility of rental. I'm not sure if there's anything can be done about that, but it was a concern for me to see that we would talk about all this housing and we would not be able to accommodate renters. I think that's a huge missing housing solution in our community. I'm also concerned about some of the, I need to find a better word here, but maybe some dysfunction is creeping in to the working group. Not having some of the alternatives included was concerning. I would definitely like to see those once they're developed. I think it may be just a timing thing. That was my read. And then one of the other concerns that I have, and I say this as someone who used to live in Ventura, so just full disclosure there, I do have a soft spot in my heart for that neighborhood at times. But I'm concerned that we have a lot of discussion about increasing the density in this neighborhood and not in, looking for more opportunities throughout the city. And I think it's important because, my understanding of, just hearing from those comments from the neighbors in Ventura, I do think that they're interested in being part of the housing solution. But I also sensed that there was some concern that they would be the only neighborhood trying to solve this, or they'd be trying to solve it alone, or trying to solve it first, or whatever. This is a community-wide area that the city needs to address. So I would say that being able to include this as part of a larger plan, I think Commissioner Olczyk alluded to this as well, would go a long way into understanding how we as a community, a larger community, are going to solve the housing shortage and not just restrict it to, you know, certain neighborhoods. So those were some of the concerns I had. And then finally, other commissioners may have mentioned this as well, but looks like the survey could be improved in terms of who is surveyed and making it a more representative sample. I think that would be really interesting if we have the means to do that. I know sometimes it's just a matter of getting the questions out there and seeing who answers, but if we have the ability to, be a little bit more well-rounded in terms of who we get our responses from, that would be super helpful. As for the alternatives, I agree with Commissioner Heckman that alternative one does not seem like enough. As for an aspirational goal, it might be a good starting point. I could see that. I liked the way that you presented alternative 2 as not displacing current tenants and being more open to creative zoning solutions there, like the fourplexes, and prioritizing maintaining the feel of the neighborhood. I could definitely hear that from some of the neighbors who spoke during public comment, that the feel of the neighborhood is very important. So I really liked that. And then for alternative 3, I would like to hear more about the, and we can do this offline, but I'm interested about getting more out of the space that's currently occupied by the Fry's building, and finding ways to do that that still honor the work that went on there in the historic frame, finding ways to either echo some of the key architectural elements, or finding a way to do some area that honors the work that went on there. However, I do like the idea, having worked in that building before, I do think that it's very outdated and does not have the facilities for a modern workplace. So I definitely think that that I would be open to seeing if we could find a way to honor the historical work while also being able to update the facilities, including with housing. So those were my thoughts. I really appreciate you bringing this to us. It is like many other commissioners have said before me. It is early, but great. Thank you for bringing it to us early and giving us a chance to weigh in. I know that we haven't had the level of participation yet from the planning commissioners at the NVCAP meetings, so this is a great way to bring it to us. I will plug once again, this is a huge opportunity for Palo Alto, and would really benefit from some of the planning commissioners finding a way to get involved more. So you don't have to be appointed to it to attend. We have many community members who attend regularly, and I've really learned a lot. It's a great group, and the work that's going to come out of this, I hope, will influence this 60-acre area for the next 100 years. So Thank you to all the people that are on the NVCAP and to all the staff that have prepared this material. All right, Commissioner Suma.
Thank you. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to go another round, or I think part of my earlier statement was based on, I was really unclear from the staff report what kind of feedback you wanted right now. And I was concerned that those three that we really evaluate those three alternatives as if we were picking one at this time, because it's way too soon. I in no way ever envisioned that the NVCAP working group and staff and consultants would stop working on this at this time. That never occurred to me. But I will say that I think we have to be careful to create a neighborhood that has development standards that are less than what we would have in other neighborhoods. And that's in terms of parking standards and development standards of buildings themselves. And I would love to see a central park here too, but as Commissioner Heckman wanted, but I don't, you know, the city has to acquire land to buy a park. They have to buy land and somebody has to sell it. So I don't think it's that realistic, especially not right now. And unless some sort of deal, there's always opportunities to make deals, but it is hard for the city to acquire land where they don't have it. So if we're going to make a neighborhood that is so underserved by parks, according to our laws and Quimby Act and stuff, I think we have to be very clear that we are not providing parks. And I think adaptive reuse of a building, like a warehouse type building, like the Fry site for housing, is done all over the country and can be incredibly lovely, architecturally a gem in the neighborhood. And I think that all three, there's probably, I don't want to rigidly be held to the three. I want to explore the ideas that come from working group members. There's probably things in three that are good, but I don't think any of the three alternatives, the way they are right now, is adequate. And I would like to address the Park Boulevard bike situation and see how, not going to happen next week or next year even, but how that can be improved. That's a very important bike boulevard and it's very unsafe also. So I don't know if we want to go a whole nother round or if Rachel got kind of a general direction in what we're doing here, but I just wanted to emphasize some of those ideas.
Thank you, Commissioner Suma. I too wanted to ask Ms. Tanner if we want to have a motion or somehow capture and formalize, or if the information, just the discussion itself has been beneficial. And I do see some other hands up, but it'd be helpful to know how to close this.
Yeah, I mean, this discussion so far has been helpful. If commissioners do have further comments, perhaps from hearing each other speak or just learning more through this process, it's great. If you have ideas afterwards that you forgot to have or tell, you could also email me, and it's not like you can't continue to provide thoughts on this process because it's still in motion. And then as far as a formal motion, we don't need a formal motion at this time as it's a study session. And so when you feel that we could conclude the discussion.
All right, that sounds good. So I'm comfortable going another round. Be forewarned, I'm sitting outside, so I'm getting cold, but that is not your problem. So next I see Vice Chair Rupavar, followed by Commissioner Lowing.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief, but I did want to provide a little bit more guidance, I guess, on my thoughts. I agree with the commissioners that, that we want a more housing dense site here. Therefore, also, I'm not, I think option one is a good starting point, but I'm leaning more towards the more dense alternatives. With that said, I am also, what Chair Templeton said about being sensitive to the fact of not just sticking all the affordable housing in the Ventura neighborhood. that seems very unfair. I mean, this is a burden that everybody needs to share across Palo Alto. Not burden, but you know, it needs to be fairly allocated. You can't just put all the affordable housing or all the housing dense, you know, sites into one area. I liked Commissioner Heckman's comment about the milestones. That was interesting and an interesting idea to explore. I think we should also give thoughtful consideration as to the remaining mix of uses to have on the site in order to activate the space. I agree with Commissioner allowing that open space needs to be real open space. And I agree also that eminent domain needs to be off the table. I don't think that's productive. This should be a collaborative process. And I also agree that we should see this again. It should come back to us before it goes to City Council if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Rupavar. Commissioner Lowing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I was startled to hear that this might not come back to PTC. I actually definitely agree with excuse me, Commissioner Alchek, that ultimately on issues like this, it's our responsibility to be recommending items to council. My prior comments did not contradict that, I hope. I was just saying that it's too early for us to do that because there's still some scenarios that have to be played out, and I'd like to have some more kind of work there to go on as we make our recommendation to council. We can clear that up with one call to the mayor and see if that's the case. But I think this absolutely has to come back to us because that's our job. But I also just want to point out that those people in the neighborhood get that as well. And they're not ignoring that. So we don't want to sort of talk down to that because I don't think that's what they're thinking. They're trying to think of a way to get both, a great neighborhood and some housing, and have it done where it's a pleasant way to be as the document plays it out. So I think that's doable. I think we should also take another look offline at the process from getting to where we are here, back to the working group and back to us, so that when it comes back to us, nobody's surprised and we know what to expect, and we can be very productive if that's in a meeting or 2 meetings or a long meeting or whatever it has to be. Certainly Commissioner Suma would have to be involved in that, and maybe more from the working group, or maybe there's some other things, but I think we just want to make sure it doesn't come back sort of undone. We need to be ready to go and ready to prep to make our recommendation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lowing. Commissioner Alchek.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that comment, Commissioner Lowing. I do think then I misunderstood you to some extent. I thought that the sort of comments that you and Commissioner Suma made earlier were a general dissatisfaction with the report's suggested timeline. And I was worried that we were suggesting that we wanted to not proceed on what I understood as like an aggressive schedule of getting it back to us and going forward. And so, let me clarify. If our recommendation tonight is to proceed with the timeline to have this theoretically come back to us this summer with an opportunity to push it to council before the fall, then I would support that motion. I'm reluctant to provide the working group with more time than absolutely necessary to review if the working group needs more time to review the options and in a complete way, then I think that's good. But I'm sort of reluctant with giving them enough, with providing more time to come to some conclusion. I think we need perspectives, and then I think if we keep that timeline rigid, then they'll be forced to sort of provide all of their input, and then we can move forward, and then council ultimately can make some decisions. Because I don't I don't think that our overarching goals as a city with respect to development are, somehow cloudy to us because of the current pandemic. I think we can articulate what we want to see there. And I certainly think that there's opportunity, even in the short term, for things to be developed in line with whatever we end up putting forward. And so I just don't want to delay the opportunity to provide that template. So I thank you for that clarification, because I think now we are really on the same page, which is to keep this ball moving forward as staff has suggested.
Thank you, Commissioner Alchek. Commissioner Heckman, do you have any additional thoughts? No? Okay. I have one additional thought that I did not spell out earlier, but related to circulation, the circulation component. I think that for the housing, the dense areas of housing discussions to continue or to move forward, there are some key transportation areas that need to be addressed, and some of them involved multiple jurisdictions. So like that intersection of El Camino and Oregon/Page Mill. So I would say that that's a big takeaway for staff from this discussion, should be to think about how can we prioritize and push forward some improvements there that would make conversations about adding housing and that site easier, because it is a really challenging intersection. I know we have a couple of intersections in the city that that need that kind of attention. So if there's any way that we can lean on that and have those be, even if it's not a traffic study, at least having some of those sites be prioritized, and to maybe have a report back on how progress is developing and improving those intersections would go a long way towards improving the nature of this discussion. All right. Well, thank you all for chiming in. I think I anticipated this might be a fun and lengthy discussion. So thank you all, and to the members of the public who hung in there to hear the whole thing. We appreciate you and recognize the 3.5 hour commitment that you have made to this conversation. So thank you all. With that, I guess we need to close this agenda item and move on to, let's see, is this minutes? Is that what's next on the agenda? Yes, okay. So we're moving to agenda item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes. I understand that one of our commissioners has submitted some minor, not substantial text changes that don't need discussion. That's from Commissioner Hechtman. But any other thoughts that haven't been submitted already to staff, or any changes to the minutes? Raise your hands if so. Okay, would anyone like to move to approve the February 12th and or February 26th meeting minutes? Oops. Commissioner Suma. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I'll move to approve. I forget the dates. I have to.
February 12th and February 26th.
February 12th.
Okie doke. Any seconds?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Rupavar. Any discussion? All right. Do we need to do these separately, or can we combine them? Oh, Commissioner Lowing, you're on mute.
Just to answer your question, you can absolutely approve both in one motion.
Okay. Commissioner Suma, can we do both?
Yes, I'll change
Is that
my.
okay with, thank you. Is that okay with the seconder?
Yes.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, let's do our voice vote. Thank you, Albert.
Okay, so for the roll call vote, Commissioner Awcheck. Commissioner Awcheck?
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Commissioner Heckman?
Aye.
Commissioner Lowing?
Yes.
Vice Chair Rupavar?
Yes.
Commissioner Suma?
Yes.
Chair Templeton?
Yes.
This motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we are on to committee items. We had a thorough update of the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan. Commissioner Suma, anything to add? Okay. I should mention that the XCAP has also resumed via Zoom. So if you want to participate in those discussions, you are welcome to listen in. We just had our first meeting last week, and we'll be going every other week, I believe. All right, any other committee items? Seeing no hands raised, moving on. Any questions about or comments or announcements or future agenda items, please raise your hands. Ms. Tanner, could you please tell us what is up for the upcoming meeting or two as of now?
Yeah, so the next meeting, we're going to be talking about, ironically, or perhaps maybe Commissioner Alcheck knew, SB 35, and that legislation requires some, if we become subject to it, requires us to have objective standards for development. And so it's a pretty major shift in how we might review development potentially for the city. I mean, really, especially with the Architectural Review Board would or could, depending on the path we choose, really fundamentally change the way that that body operates and really the way that development is reviewed. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. I imagine it would probably be a good 2.5 hour discussion. It's quite meaty in terms of just the content itself. There's a lot of moving parts, and we have great staff. We have a really talented consultant working with us on it as well, and we'll be doing a presentation about the item, but I'm looking forward to it. It's a study session, so we don't need to take action, but I know that the ARB wanted to make sure it came to the PTC before the item went back to them. They've had 2 discussions about it and want to see where the PTC is and kind of some of your reflections as they continue to really dig into that topic. And depending on how things go with the economy, maybe we won't have to hurry as much with it, but it is something we want to get done so that we can be in compliance with the state laws. And then we will be having the meeting following the EV charger item. Will be returning. Albert, who is on the line here, has been working quite a lot with our staff on that. And I believe at that same meeting, we will have an item from transportation. I'm sorry, I don't recall what the item is, but they will also be coming with that item that day. And hopefully before June is out, we will also bring before you an update to our ADU ordinance. You may recall we had to do an urgency ordinance in January, which Albert and then also Amy French helped on because we needed to make sure that our law still was in effect, even though state law had changed, and make sure that they were kind of married. And this really is a more thoughtful kind of look at how do we help to facilitate more ADU development in a way that is in line with what we want to see in our community, and creating just a really more thoughtful code and easier to read code. And that would really be a precursor to some publications, some ways we can really help the community be more informed about how they can build ADUs and what that could look like in the future.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments? I see Commissioner Alcheck.
Yeah, I just want to say that I've been on a lot of Zoom meetings in the last weeks, and credit to you and staff, Chair Templeton, for running a unbelievably well-run meeting. So you should be very proud of yourself and staff as well, because this has gone better than 100% of my Zoom meetings so far, and that's really a testament to the dedication that you guys have. So nice work tonight.
Oh, thanks. I'm really shocked that my kids have not found me. I'm hiding on the patio. So so far so good. All right. So last call for comments, questions, announcements, etc. All right. With that, I would like to reflect back to Commissioner Alchek and the other commissioners here, my appreciation for you sticking with what has turned out to be a very long and intense discussion, but very valuable and important to the community. So thank you all for making this a great Zoom meeting, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.